It is Tuesday. It is the 8th of February 2022, and it's just about 7:34 p.m. in the studios at Q95. It is the 6th Tuesday of 2022. I'm your host, Sheridan Gregoire. My distinguished guest tonight, Justice Dr. Irving Andre, economist and financial consultant, Dr. Thomson Fontaine. And tonight we begin on a historic series, but we have with us tonight some very distinguished contributors to the program. We have Mr. Lennox Linton, who is the parliamentary opposition leader, and of course the leader of the United Workers' Party. We also have Mr. Bernard Ito, who's the distinguished leader of the Dominica Freedom Party. And we have Mr. Kent Vital, economist, who is the head of NJAM, that's the National Joint Action Movement. You heard a wonderful program from NJAM last night, and I'm sure Kent may tell us one or two things tonight while he's with us. But tonight we begin, we continue on this historic journey. We're looking at our political leaders, the past, their lives, their leadership, their legacies. We started off with Frank Barron, and tonight we're going to move on with Edward Oliver Leblanc. Later on, we'll go on to Patrick Oran John and to Oliver G. Seraphin, then Mary Eugenia Charles, Edison Chenfield James, Roosevelt Douglas, Pierre Charles, and then finally we will be doing Roosevelt Skerritt. We will take an intimate comparative look at those Dominican leaders over the years. Tonight, I tried to reach Hewart Leblanc, who's the son of Edward Oliver Leblanc. I did not get him, but if Hewart is listening, certainly hope he can give us a call. I'm sure there might be one or two things he'd like to share about his dad as we speak about his dad tonight. So the question is, who are they? Who are these leaders? Where did they come from? What were they like? What was their leadership style? How long did they stay? Did they remain as political leaders? Were they unifiers or dividers? What did they accomplish? What was the state of the economy? What was the state of the economy while they held office? Did they create significant jobs or foreign earnings? What was the state of the democracy during their tenure? Very, very important. What was the state of the democracy? Did they respect, uphold, and conform to the laws and to the Constitution? Were they corrupt? Were they corrupt? Did they practice big or prudent government? What were the major pillars of the economy in their era? Was there resilience and sustainability of the people then versus now? Was there resilience and sustainability of the natural environment and architectural heritage? Was there peace and justice and unity and harmony among and well-being among our Dominican, Afro-Caribbean, and Cardinal brothers and sisters at home and abroad during their tenure? What is the legacy of each and every one of them? Here's a question. Can we do better than we are doing now? Are we better off now than we have been at any time over the past 50 years? So tonight we're dealing with Edward Oliver Leblanc. I hope that because we have Mr. Lennox Linton, Mr. Bernard Ito, and Mr. Ken Vital with us, they will look into the politics of it. They will look into the social aspect of it. They look at the cultural aspect, the industry aspect, the economic aspect, and to compare the eras, of those people to what we have now. I know Dr. Thomson Fontaine will be able to help us in a very, very considerable, deep way on the economic aspect of it, and maybe on the political aspect of it as well. So the question is, are we better off now than we have been at any time over the past 50 years? So stay with us on Q95, the big station, and on Facebook and YouTube for this intriguing lecture series on the lives, the leadership, and legacies of Dominica's political leaders. As I said, we have my distinguished guest tonight, Justice Dr. Irving Andre, economist and financial consultant, Dr. Thomson Fontaine, and with us also is Mr. Kent Vital, Mr. Lennox Linton, and Mr. Okay, so here's the thing, and as you know, We always try to do these discussions, and tonight is no exception, with absolutely no anger, no malice, no personal attacks, no vilification, no divisiveness, and just bringing back civility, a caring society, good governance, peace, and love among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters and friends of Dominica at home and abroad. So wherever you are in Dominica, in the region and globally, join this conversation on the Global View on Q and have your say as you do every Tuesday with me, Mr. G, and my distinguished guests, only on Q95, the big station. And we do say a big thank you and we give a shout out to our healthcare providers and frontline workers doing their best to keep us safe from this deadly coronavirus and its variants, including Omicron. Please follow the correct advice and guidelines and protocols. Play it safe, stay alive. Happy to have you with us tonight, wherever you are, in your neck of the woods in Dominica, in the region, and in the global community. Our engineer Sherwin Norris is keeping us on the air as usual, and Lambert Lambi Charles, indefatigable Lambi, is on the console at Q95 directing the traffic. He will direct your calls to us a bit later. So now I want to get started now, and I do go first to Justice Dr. Irving Andre to get the conversation going on the situation just leading up to and during the period of Edward Oliver Leblanc, the first premier, I believe, of Dominica in his era. Dr. Justice Dr. Andre, the mic is yours.
Well, let me thank you again, Mr. G, for accommodating this wonderful program and for putting together such a auspicious body of persons, distinguished patriots. Let me welcome Bernardito. Let me welcome Ken Vidal. Let me Lennox Linton. Let me show in Dr. Thomson, Fontaine, Lambi, yourself. Let me welcome your listeners to this great program. We hope we can somewhat enlighten them in some fashion without being too presumptuous. Let us start by acknowledging that in these days, we have to say that, and we have to acknowledge that this is the day the Lord has made. We live in very difficult times, in very trying times, in times when people are going through serious storms of difficulty, of hardship, of poverty, of illness. And those of us who can stand and breathe and talk and walk and articulate and appreciate those among us, we have to count our blessings because there are literally millions of people who don't have the privilege of doing so. But we're here tonight not to basically focus on ourselves. We're here to focus on Edward Oliver Leblanc, Dominica's leader, political leader, I should say, from 61 to 1974. And Edward Oliver Leblanc's antecedents are well known. Impoverished background, Vacaz, a member of a large family, a poor family. And basically, he grew up in that environment. He went to the government school in Vacaz, and in fact, his great mentor was a gentleman, a head teacher called Clive Sarando, who was the patriarch of the Sarando family. It's a rather interesting point, given the fact that he had a difficult relationship with a few sons of the great Clive Sarando. But the fact of the matter is, within that environment, he understood, as very few other leaders could understand, the deleterious effects of poverty, of class, of caste, the way persons from the country were treated. He lamented throughout his career initially that when his father would bring his agricultural produce to a certain vantage point on about Thibault, if my memory serves me right, the father would receive a few yards of khaki. All his
Irvin,
hard
Irvin, can I just interrupt you 1 second? I'm hearing a little feedback coming from somebody's mic or somebody has a device on. It may not necessarily be yours, but I would like to ask everybody just take the mic, check to see if there's anything they are playing in the background that might be feeding back into their mic. Because we are getting some feedback. Uh, uh, Maybe Lennox, you might want, if your mic is on, you might want to turn it off. I can't see you at a minute, but if you turn it off, maybe that might help just to make sure it's not you. All right, Irvin, sorry about that interruption.
That's okay. So yes, so here's a man who basically was confronted and had to deal with those awful effects of poverty, of growing up in the country, of having to face this type of wall in terms of his own aspirations. And he obviously, he did go to the agricultural school in Monbruce, and he met some persons with whom he had a lifelong tradition. But his foray into politics was basically triggered by a very negative experience. He applied for a scholarship for advanced study, and he was cast aside literally in a very dismissive fashion. He was told indirectly that he hadn't breathed the rarefied air of a secondary school. And obviously, even in the 50s, or even in the 40s, I should say, going to the secondary school was a privilege. Although on or about 1947, 1948, Clifton Dupini, a prominent Dominican lawyer, was instrumental in getting the fees to the Dominican Grammar School cut by 50%. It was still a very formidable obstacle to students from the country. So Edward Oliver Leblanc, sensitive, reserved chap, grew up with that feeling of basically being shafted literally by the system. And that was his primary impetus to enter the realm of politics. Not for self-aggrandizement, not for his own personal purse, but to make things better for those who toiled in the vineyards for little or no compensation whatsoever. And he did so. He contested initially in the North. I think he initially contested, if my memory serves me right, against RBD. He beat him. He became a member of the Labour Party in 1957, which was founded in 55. In 58, he contested the general elections for membership for the federal government. He and Felicia Allfrey won on one of the parties, for one of the parties, and he went to Trinidad, where he remained until 1960. He came back to Dominica to lead the Labour Party into electoral victory in 1961. His doing so created a rift between himself and Phyllis Allfrey, one of the founders of the Labour Party, which culminated somewhat unfortunately in the 1963 expulsion of all three, along with Emmanuel Leblanc from the Dominican Labour Party. But Edward Oliver Leblanc ascended the throne, or should I say ascended the leadership of the island with a mission to transform the society as best as he can, a mission to make sure that the produce of persons in the country garnered a market, to make sure that the children of persons from the country had greater opportunities in terms of self-advancement, particularly through secondary schools. He made it his business to ensure that Dominica's productivity to some degree was unleashed. He made sure that persons who could not afford housing on their own had the means to do so. And that is why in 1967, for example, he purchased land in the Canefield area and created 500 lots of land to be purchased by Dominicans. And right there, as I will show, along with other instances, he set his mark in terms of the type of leadership that he established. I hope one of the Leblanc boys is listening, because his siblings, many of them who were in the States at the time, they wanted to purchase lots at Canefield. And he told them no. He told them no to prevent being accused of insider trading, as it were. He, as you know, in 1970, he purchased 300 acres at Bath Estate, again for housing. In the same area, the Union Housing scheme in Point Michel, also the Kings Hill housing scheme, the Calabishi housing scheme, were all established based on the initiative and the vision of Edward Oliver Leblanc. It is often said that in terms of economics, he was somewhat weak. Well, not if you compare what occurred, or certainly what was the case in the 60s to what is now. Inspired by Sir Arthur Lewis' thesis in terms of industrialization, derisively called industrialization by invitation, but industrialization nevertheless. Industrialization through a program which offered incentives to local industry. He enacted legislation in 61, along with Ducre, with whom he had a falling out in 70, the Aid to Pioneers Industries Act, offering incentives not to the businesses of political cronies, but to everyone across the board. Let me just give you a little smattering, for example, of businesses who benefited from those types of incentives. Tax-free incentives, for example, import substitution measures, the promotion of local industry. We're talking about firms such as Eric's Bakery, Paris Bellot, yes, the same Paris Bellot, the father, Charles Brothers in furniture. Those of you who grew up in Rosewood knows about him. St. Mark's Furniture, Giddings Oilings and Fats, Dominica Coconut Products, Dominica Mining Company, J. Astafan, Philip George, Porter Welling Company, Harris Fidel, Duncan Timbers, Blatcher Products, Bruce Robinson, Sylvania Feeds, Valley Engineering Sales, etc. Dumb Fruit owned by Leo Emanuel. I think one of his sons is hosting a program on your radio show. He provided incentives for this company. He engendered the growth of the coconut industry, not only through Dominica Coconut Products, but the promotion of the making of mattresses. And as you know, Mr. G, the whole mattress industry not only helped local industry, it also helped the banana industry, because every coconut fiber mattress had a hole in it where people saved their money. That is what he did. He engendered local industry. But not only that, he placed restrictions. Sorry, Mr. G, did I interrupt you? No. He placed restrictions on the number of persons who are not ordinarily resident in Dominica in terms of being or gaining employment in Dominica. Under his leadership, he also enacted the Aliens Landholding Act, imposing a restriction on the amount of land that foreigners can own in Dominica. Why? What is the justification for that? It is clear. And obviously, in the early 70s, he enacted legislation protecting the beaches of Dominica for Dominicans themselves. And the justification for that type of legislation is clear to everyone. He realized that there's an intrinsic value in Dominicans being masters of their own island, their own country. So it was imperative, and it's so important to him that the government had a role to play in ensuring that the future prosperity of Dominica reposed in the hands of Dominicans. And throughout his tenure in office, he was governed by this sense of altruism, this sense that he was there to do a job, the benefits of which would inure to the benefit of Dominicans on the ground. Secondary schools, from 61 to 65, 8 brand new schools. In 63, the Goodwill, whatever the name is, I can't remember, the Goodwill School, which is a gift from the Canadians, but under his leadership. In 63, the new government Dominic Grammar School opened with a technical wing, another avenue for children from the so-called country to hone their skills, to become welders, to become auto mechanics, to become qualified in various trades, an adjunct of the Dominic Grammar School. And I can't comment on what obtains now, but many persons, and if my memory serves me right, including one of the persons who was on the program this morning from Castle Bruce, benefited from his tenure at the Dominica Grammar School, the so-called trade wing, the technical wing, as it was known. What about culture? Again, he wanted to free Dominicans from the sense of inferiority that many felt vis-a-vis those who grew up in so-called privileged surroundings in Roseau. The whole question on the indigenization of culture, the emphasis on local dance, on Creole, on conte, on storytelling, on being able to speak the language of the people without any sense of inferiority. That was birthed essentially by Edward Oliver Leblanc. Yes, Sissy Corderon had done some things, but on an individual scale, not on the type of scale that Edward Leblanc instituted. In other words, he tried to free Dominicans from the debilitating effects of inferiority. And he did that to a significant degree, much to the chagrin of those who felt that we have to grow up being Afro-Saxons or speaking English with an English accent. That those who speak, for example, Creole are no less than those who did not. He made it acceptable. But he also had a keen sense of history, because under his watch, he tried to propagate an understanding of Dominican history. The Leblanc government in 1973 or thereabouts financed, as you may remember, aspects of Dominican history, where a number of well-known Dominican historians, both in Dominica and without and outside, the most significant being Joseph Borromei, who was a professor at some university in New York, wrote pieces how the French came into Dominica, how Crown Colony government came into Dominica, delving into the past, because he felt that it has an intrinsic value and Dominicans should know about its past. Leblanc took credit in the 60s for being perhaps the first Black Power advocate. In fact, one of the things he did, not known to many people, is that he commissioned a painting of the Archangel Gabriel slaying the dragon, and he reversed the colors, because he understood that as long as we continue to see the bad things from a religious perspective, to portray them as being black, and to portray the good things, the archangels, as white, we would be stuck in this abyss of inferiority. He tried in his own way to reverse that by even doing something in that fashion. And so when we speak of Edward Oliver Leblanc, it seems to me that we can appreciate what he tried to do and what he did, and we'll come to the obstacles that he had to confront. We can appreciate those policies and those programs and those initiatives much better then, or much better today, than perhaps we could appreciate it before. We can appreciate what altruistic leadership means. We can appreciate what leading on behalf of your people, what it really means. Suffice it to say, there was a significant increase in the number of students from the country going to the secondary schools, and not by accident. That was on account of a deliberate special policy. Suffice it to say, there was an increase in production, banana production, not by accident, but by a deliberate attempt to increase the number of feeder roads in Dominica. Suffice it to say, the increase in the number of students going to secondary schools because there was an increase in scholarships provided to these students. And if there was a significant increase in people getting housing, those who couldn't afford, it didn't happen by accident. There was no magical or celestial hand handing over these houses to anybody. It was because of a conscious policy embraced and propagated by this altruistic leader. We stand today as the beneficiaries of the goals of this leader. And the question is, what do we now have to show for it? But these are a few of my introductory remarks at this point, Mr. G.
Yes, and thank you so much for that, Dr. Andre. I wanted to bring in Lennox Linton at this time, the leader of the opposition, if he's available with us now, because I believe you've touched on so many things that it's like I was saying from the beginning. Many of our young people, probably people who are just about 30, 35 years of age, they probably have very little knowledge of what happened during Leblanc's era. And they might be of the view that things that are being done now may be being done for the first time. But Lennox, when I listen to the litany of things that Dr. Irving Andre just listed there, I mean, you can see this man was powerful And in those days, we did not have all of the resources that we have in Dominica today. I mean, if just one little statement it tells you about the character of the man. Dr. Andrew said he bought this 500 lots, created 500 lots at Cadenfield and told his children, you can't have one of them because you don't want to be accused of insider trading. Can you imagine the difference between this and what exists now? I'm going to leave it to you, Lennox, to talk about some of those things because Dr. Andrew mentioned so many things, that the Aliens Land Holding Act, where foreigners are to get a license to be able to own more than a certain amount of land. That's to ensure that the foreigners did not take over all the lands and Dominicans left with nothing in their own homeland. You know the famous song, Pakiti Upon Dominic Hodnu, right? So all of those things they're done by LeBlanc. You know, making up mattresses. I asked Stefan and some other people, I remember all his industries. Are you trying to tell me this is the man who initiated all these incentives, these industrial incentives and finance and tax incentives to allow this industry? And you see the number of companies that he mentioned that got their start from that policy environment, that enabling policy environment created by Edward Oliver LeBlanc. Talk about Eric's Bakery. How many people know about Eric Bakery? It's no longer there. DCP, it's no longer there. I think successors in its place now. But so many of these companies that we spoke about Dumb Fruit by the famous Leo Manuel. Lennox, let me hand over to you so you can give us your thoughts when you see the comparison between the LeBlanc era and the kind of man he was and what he accomplished versus where we are today.
Well, thank you, Sheridan. Thank you very much for the invite. Thank you to Q95, and a very good evening to the other members on the panel. Mr. Justice Andre, as usual, good job. Very enlightening. Dr. Fontaine, very good evening to you. Is it morning where you are? Bernardito, good evening. Good evening, Kent Vital. And good evening to all the wonderful folks of Dominica joining us from near and far. Clearly, we're in a different era of politics right now in Dominica. And you're looking at one Labour Party leader, one leader of the Labour Party then, and a leader of the Labour Party now, and the kind of leadership you had back then, and the kind of leadership you're seeing now. Because clearly, what seemed to motivate the Honorable Edward Oliver LeBlanc was that interest in his country and seeing his country do better, based on his deep belief in the fact that lives in Dominica, the lives of the people of Dominica mattered, and that he had sought and succeeded in getting into governance and government for the benefit of lifting, improving the quality of lives of Dominicans. So Justice Andre spoke about LeBlanc being passionate about the future prosperity of the country resting in the hands of Dominicans. And you could see how his policies in government, how his actions in government address that. Today, you're seeing something completely different.
Lennox, Dr. Andre, I don't know if you have your mic open. If it is, could you just mute it for a second so that we don't get too much feedback into Lennox? Okay, sorry about that, Lennox. Go right ahead.
Yeah, today, Sheridan, you're seeing something completely different from one period of the Labour Party in government to another period of the Labour Party in government. Because today, you have there can be no doubt in your mind that those who lead are really not sincerely interested, at least not as LeBlanc was, in the well-being and progress of the Dominicans whom they have offered themselves to lead. And today is littered with numerous examples of that. Almost to the point where it's becoming a culture that you have to praise politicians for using the people's money to build roads and build schools for the people. Almost as though the money belongs to them. because that is what they want the people to believe. They want the people to believe that the people's money, the state property, belongs to them, the politicians in government, and therefore they have the power and authority to use it as they please to do what they want with it. And that is how you explain, for example, revenues from the citizenship by investment program in Dominica, placing by agreement with government 60 million US dollars, 163 million EC dollars in the hands of two foreigners who came as developers of the hotel project. And they're receiving those monies even before the hotel had received 1 cent in revenue from a guest. They made over 60 million US dollars, over 163 million EC dollars for building the hotel. I don't know where anywhere else in the world that happens, but this has gone to two outsiders. While people in Dominica are suffering. And I wonder, what would LeBlanc have to say about that? And I'm from what I've read, from what I've heard again, reiterated by Justice Andre this evening, there is no way under LeBlanc's brand of leadership, anything like what is happening today, as I just described, could take place. Not at all. Neither would you see a situation where, in the country that LeBlanc loves so much and fought for so well, billions of dollars from the sale of the country's citizenship is passed into private hands of the friends of the prime minister, with no accountability whatsoever to the people of Dominica. And then in the most recent iteration of those kinds of deals with money from the sale of citizenship, you hear about a $200 million hotel facility, to be constructed under the CBI program, but the arrangement under the CBI will allow for $232 million. They can get $232 million of CBI money to build a $200 million structure. A structure, by the way, that is only going to cost $42.3 million. The construction of it will cost $26.7 million. The furniture, fittings and equipment will cost another $11.3 million. And the land on which the structure will stand, $4.1 million. A total of $42.3 million. The marketing, the pre-operating costs, and the fee to the developer, $67.1 million for a $42 million hotel. And the infrastructure cost, $58.6 million plus $24 million, $82.6 million in infrastructure costs for a $42 million hotel. 67 in marketing and pre-operating and developers fees for a $42 million hotel. Plus the $32 million available at the top that can be creamed off the top because of the difference between what the 435 citizenships will allow in terms of revenue, $87 million or $232 million, compared to what the construction cost is supposed to be, $75 million US or 202 million EC dollars. This is crazy. There is no way we could have seen that sort of reckless use of public money in the LeBlanc era. Certainly not based on what we've read, and certainly if those sorts of revenues had been available under the leadership that LeBlanc brought to Dominica, the honest, sincere leadership that he brought to Dominica, it was focused on valuing the people of Dominica, focused on ensuring that their lives mattered, and they were to be the beneficiaries of the Dominica, state of Dominica, earning itself a worthwhile place in the international goods trade of goods and services, that Dominicans would be prime beneficiaries of that. Certainly, we would have seen a lot more done in that era with the kind of resources available to government today. So it's really painful to reflect on that because these days, these days you see utilization of the resources of the government almost like an ATM machine for these ministers and their friends. I read somewhere recently where it was saying that if you praising a minister of government for using the people's money to build roads and schools and hospitals for the people is like going to the ATM and taking out money from your own account and then praising yourself, praising the ATM for giving you your money. And somehow over the years, I don't know whether Justice Andre from the historical perspective can help us with that. We seem to have lost this sense, this sense of basic civic education that allows us to understand and to work and operate on a daily basis with what governance is all about, what the people's money mean. People operate with this notion in their heads that their money belongs to a politician who they must praise for using it for them. And it is the most dangerous place that we have arrived at because it now poses a serious threat to our existence as a functioning parliamentary democracy because we are allowing Leblanc saw the value of limited time in office, didn't want to be there forever and ever, amen. These days you're watching people who would like to be there until, who continue to rule over Dominica perpetually. Never have to go anywhere, never have to do anything else. Just rule Dominica because that's what it seems they were born to do. That doesn't work for any country around the world. Leadership must change from time to time. And because this particular Labour Party group in government does not want leadership to change to anything else but them, they've taken total control of the electoral process and they're rigging elections with impunity because they believe they must continue to decide for people in a democracy who their duly elected government should be. And we didn't see that under Leblanc. We didn't see that tendency or that interest at all in wanting to take away from people that fundamental right to decide who their government should be. As a matter of fact, when after 2 terms came, Leblanc moved on.
Yeah. See, that is one of the things I wanted to comment on, Lennox, because, and I wanted to see if we could bring in Dr. Thomson Fontaine if he's with us, because I mean, the whole question of anybody wanting to stay in office forever. I mean, Edward Leblanc, at the height of the man's popularity, said, "Look here, I'm taking a back seat. I'm retiring." At the height of his popularity, this is a man who ran in several constituencies and won very easily, and yet he decided, I'm going. Dr. Andre told us.
Dr. Andre, isn't there a story told that one time somebody came bearing gifts of shirts? I think it was a dozen in a box, and he sent them back saying, "I only have one back."
Oh, you're absolutely correct. That is not some type of fictional story. That's a real story. In fact, what happened is that on about 1973, 74, before he left, when that person's store had been vandalized and cannibalized to some degree, and as a gesture of goodwill, the owner presented some nice fancy. Well, Mr. Gregoire is a fabric magnate. He was so shiny colored cloth. There's a local name for it, but I can't remember. Oh, thank you, Mr. Linton. Your memory is fantastic. And he told him, "No, I've only one back. I don't have another back. But that was the nature of the man. He had a scrupulous anxiety not to accept anything he didn't work for. Not only did he provide it for all his children, but he gave bursaries to 7 other students, impoverished students from Dominica. But this is the type of leadership that we have nurtured, and this is the type of leadership that we long for at this particular juncture, when money is raining down like rain, and it's not filtering to the benefit of the majority of Dominicans. Not even a $25 stimulus package to buy a brand new tin of corned beef, if you so desire, as opposed to a titiri accra. Dominicans don't deserve not even that form of charity in 2021 or 2022.
Yes, and Dr. Andre, I'm glad that Dr. Thomson Fontaine is with us. Again, Dr. Fontaine, I don't know whether there is a delay in my voice reaching you. If there is, we'll soon find out. But certainly, I wanted to bring you in before I go over to Bernard and Kent, because certainly, I believe you can tell us a little bit more about Edward Oliver Leblanc's history. But yet, I hope you will talk a little bit about the economics of the situation at the time, in terms of the kind of enabling environment that the policy environment that he created for industry. And so many industries, so many businesses thrived and came up because of that. And then, of course, we hear about the man's own honesty. He did not really want his children to buy lots where he was going to create lots for people. Nowadays, I'm hearing people talking about all kind of things. Nobody's getting a title. But Leblanc didn't want his own children to get a lot from there, because he said, let them not accuse us of insider trading. Right? So I wanted you to come in so that you can build on some of that Dr. Andre has already given us, and then what Lennox also spoke about. So you can look at the economic situation, what existed then with Leblanc, what the man's policies were, what his philosophy was, how he was all about other people compared to what we have now. Dr. Fontaine, the mic is yours. You can look at the economic situation. I imagine there's a little delay. What the man's policies were, what his philosophy was, how he was all about other people compared to what we have now.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Thank you, Sheridan, and a very good night. A very good night to you and to the many listeners, and of course to my fellow panelists, Dr. Andre, Honorable Lennox, Linton, of course, and Kent Vital, Lambi, and to all the listeners. You know, I'm holding here in my hand this excellent work by Dr. Andre, which is the Edward Oliver Leblanc and the Struggle to Transform Dominica. I believe that is a book that every single Dominican should get a hold of, because here we have the story of an exemplary leader, a person who I believe everybody should emulate, and one which sadly our current leader is anything but. You know, Dr. Andre talked earlier about his legacy, the legacy of Edward Leblanc. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. For example, Dr. Andre talked about his work that he did in the banana industry. Edward Oliver Leblanc was able to cultivate a path for hundreds and hundreds of people, as he referred to them as the little man, the poor Malawi. People from the countryside, country areas, who could then send their children to school. I was a direct beneficiary of this. I consider myself to be a child of the banana boom that Edward Oliver created. In fact, he doubled the exports of Dominica in 5 years between 1970 and 1974. By from $11 million to $20 million. Now, this is very significant, because if you were to look at this, the value of those exports in 1974, some 48 years or so ago, if you were to compare the value of that now, that's roughly $270 million in exports. That is hugely significant. When you compare that to under this regime, exports of about $5 million a year. So it gives you a sense as to how much we've lost our way as well, but how much in terms of legacy that spoke to Edward Oliver LeBlanc. It also shows that during his time, he had formidable opposition from very powerful trade unionists. And he never went out of his way, any arbitrary arrest. You never heard of any arbitrary arrests. You never heard of him, condescending to his opponents. When he had to act in 1970 rather, when he fired the three ministers of government, he did so because he saw a threat to his own rule and acted. He was a very powerful exponent of federation, served as one of the two Dominica ministers of federation, along with Phyllis Chandolfrey. But one of the things that he really exemplified was pride in country, in the country's culture. What we have now, we call our Independence Day celebration, our Creole celebration, encouraging the speaking of patois and Creole. All of these we can actually point to. But I want to quote from the book by Dr. Irving Andre, which I believe really speaks volumes and really makes a direct contrast to the kind of leaders we have today. He says that LeBlanc's unblemished record of not financially benefiting from his position has not been altogether emulated by later Dominican politicians. To some of his successors, political office in Dominica provided a rare opportunity to enjoy significant perks of power, generous travel allowances, and untrammeled use of state resources. It is clear, therefore, that the culture of public service, scrupulously nurtured by LeBlanc, has not persisted in the 30-year period following his departure from politics. That is a man, in fact, who voluntarily, at the ripe old age of 50, decided to walk away from the leadership of the country. A few short months before elections were due in Dominica, he walked away from it, just gave it up. An election which he was sure to win, because it turned out that his successor, Patrick John, went on to win that election by a landslide. So it shows a rare quality, something that we yearn for, something that we wish we had in the current leader that we have in Dominica. But everything that LeBlanc was, Roosevelt Skerrit is not. And let's be very clear about that. Everything, the only thing they have in common, I believe, is that they came from the same village. But that's where the comparison ends. In terms of his selflessness, in terms of the desire to build people up. In fact, we see him open up the way they said for hundreds and hundreds of Dominicans to climb out of poverty. We don't have that today. What we have is a reinforcing of poverty in the people of Dominica. Very few Dominicans have been helped out of poverty today in today's Dominica. Rather, they have been held subservient. They have been pushed down by this administration. I believe the strength of and the popularity of Edward Oliver LeBlanc was seen in his death, because when he died in 2004, although he was out of public view for many, many years, yet his death was reported across the globe. I counted no less than 45 newspapers that reported the death of Edward Oliver LeBlanc. Papers like the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Tampa Tribune, Newsday, Des Moines Editor, the Times of London, the Free Press, Tribune, Miami Herald, and you name it. Just countless papers that reported on the death of this man. And one of the things that they indicated and wanted, a lot of them picked up on, even many, many years later following his death, they indicated that he walked away at the prime of his reign because he was fed up with politics. And I wish the same would apply to our current leader, that he would realize that his time is up, that he's done enough and that he would walk away from politics as Linton did. At least we can get two things in common. But before I end this piece, I want as well to just read, if you'll indulge me, Edward Oliver Leblanc, and was also a man of words, and he wrote a lot. And some of it is in Dr. Andre's book, as I said, Edward Oliver Leblanc, To Transform Dominica. But there is a particular poem that he wrote, and I want to read it. I'll read it very quickly. It's called Siècle la vie, or The Cycle of Life. And this he wrote in 1974, just when he was contemplating leaving politics. Miss Sabrin sat before her heart, contemplating the meaning of life, and what she perceived for us was a sound philosophy. Woolly hair as white as cotton, her feet shrunken, her palms wrinkled, her body emaciated to the extreme, but her mind as active as ever. Her eyes clear and piercing, her teeth strong and evenly lined, defied anyone from realizing that she was 105. She is wondering how life has changed, but yet realizes that life goes like the seasons, which constantly change but remain constant. Things don't change, the reasons do. Nature is the same: rain, lightning, thunder, storm, pleasure, heartbreaks, seemingly unbreakable. The brilliant light of stars dimmed by clouds, the sun makes his diurnal turn of the heavens. Every year trees flower, seeds drop, and again grow into trees. Dew falls in the night to ensure that the trees do not die. The animals, tame, wild, ferocious, caged, tied or loose in the woods, deep water fishes in stony or weedy areas, the birds of the air all observe the same laws. All men and women are also under the law. Children are born, they grow and die. The children repeat this refrain. All roads lead to the same goal. When she was young, young women walked naked because people were innocent in those days. Today, short dresses custom to Shiva. Our world today is terrible. Formerly, it was bitter grass and breadfruit, but people were strong. They lived longer. Today, it is cheese, table butter, and bread. But life is short. It is the recounting that is long. Formerly, people did not talk much, but they were always of good disposition. Today, they make sweet vocal songs more than the CEO, but are as hard-hearted as the mothers. Every age is the same, yet always different. This mystery man cannot unravel, that started since the days of Adam. Neither obeah, flood, nor strike can change. With all her thinking, she cannot ignore the child who is playing in the sand, taking an oyster shell to bathe, not with water, but with dry sand. The old woman shivered. Something shocked her. Eyes fixed upwards, and with folded arms, she discovered a very little light beaming deep in the horizon of the heart. Although so old, so tired, so emaciated, she learned something from the action of the child. She saw her race straining and harassing since creation to this day. She saw her Panacea, who traveled before her all the roads she has traveled and still must travel, chained, thirsty, molested, and hungry. She saw her great-great-grandfather. She saw her mother molested and raped. She saw her sisters be all strained with clenched teeth. They suffered all, they could not say no. They sowed, plowed, planted, waited, ripped with cold sweat under the midday sun. Their backs naked, deformed in a less enviable state. Their sins, their color, which deserved punishment. But time, like a flooding river, saw us clean. She now possessed the land our parents bled for. Today the table are turned, we are our own masters. Our sweat will be for our own advancement. The old woman perceived all this. She saw herself like a golden bridge joining all her generations, yet again like a hoop without an end. We understand better today than therefore. We shall work together for mutual progress, the young, the old, the indigent, and the sage, so that no Dominican shall regret tomorrow. Let us all for National Day sing, dance, and recite with loud voices, all for each and each for all, so that all Dominicans will always speak with one voice. And that, I think, embodies the man, a yearning and a longing for one Dominica, a united Dominica, something that sadly we've lost.
Yes, something we've lost, but something I believe that you yourself, Dr. Thomson Fontaine, are trying to revive. I like to call you as the unifier for modern day Dominica. But I want to thank you for reading from Dr. Andre's illustrious book. And I want to thank Lennox before you for making all of the comments and making those comparisons that he did with Leblanc's era and today's days, what we experience. You can see Leblanc he left politics at a relatively young age, but when you listen to his poem, he speaks like a man who's seen all of life, and he's seen people, and he can really see people. He wasn't just seeing crowds and numbers, he saw people. Dr. Andre, thank you for that book. A little later on, when I come back to you, I want to ask you to hold up that book so the world can see it. And you might want to make one or two references from it, because this really speaks about the lives and the life and the leadership and the legacies of that great Dominican hero, Edward Oliver Leblanc. I want to go over to Bernard now, because I will come back to Kent afterwards, because we have to go back to the economics of the day, Ken, when I come back to you, because that's important for us to do that. But Bernard, you've listened to Dr. Irving Andre speak about Edward Oliver Leblanc, a different era. You're a young chap. You might not have known Irving Andre. If I might not have known Edward Leblanc, I knew him very well. One of his sons, is one of my very best friends. I hope he's listening right now in New York, if that's where he is now. The fact of the matter is, I played dominoes with Edward Oliver Leblanc at his home in Vickers. His brother was my godfather. All right. So I knew Edward Oliver Leblanc very well, and his wife was the greatest person you've ever met. That lady, bless her soul, the very greatest you ever met. And when it was time for him to leave politics, she did not discourage him, for sure. I believe Dr. Andre will tell you she did not discourage him, because she was also somebody who believed in family. And, these were real people. All right. They had no wealth. They did not believe in wealth, but they had a profound respect for life and for people. And they wanted to lift people up from poverty, improve the quality of their lives and their living standards. Bernard, I want to go to you, because you're the new generation. You can serve as a bridge between that sort of era where we are talking about now, the Edward Oliver, Frank Baron, Edward Oliver Leblanc. Look at their legacy, the things this man tried to do. Look at his mindset, the way the man was thinking. Everything was about others, not of himself. People gave him shirts. He said, I have only one back. I don't need your shirts. I have enough shirts. Shirts. Today, what are we talking about in terms of gifts? Millions and millions of dollars of gifts. That's what we're talking about these days. Edward Leblanc wouldn't take a shirt. When Dr. Andre comes back, he'll tell us all about those things that Edward Leblanc refused. But Bernard, I want to go over to you now so you can see as well the politics of it all. You are now the leader of a major political party in Dominica. How do you see the comparisons in that space, in the Edward Oliver Leblanc, compared to what you're witnessing now in this era that we're going through? I'll turn the mic over to you now, Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. G. And good evening and various good things, evenings, early mornings, and so forth. It's a global conversation. But greetings to all my panelists. And I think it's a wonderful thing that we're doing, focusing on the historical aspects of this thing, as well as creating, in my mind, a microcosm, really, of the kind of community we should be as a Dominica, right? We don't necessarily have to wait for the future to be realized. We can create the future now, because we are behaving across political platforms, across political parties. We're having this sort of mature conversations, this sort of communal conversations that we wish to see broadly happening in our community. And so we are creating, I think, from these conversations, this getting together and having these discussions, sort of the community we would like to see. So we experience in the future in a micro way, but we're experiencing it now. And the historical aspect is so critical. It is something that I am an advocate for. I think a country that does not understand the populace, that does not understand its psychological makeup, its emotional makeup, its economic history, why it is where it is economically, why it is where it is politically, are living in a vacuum. You're not really grounded as a community, as a society. And you do not have that sense of nationalism that is necessary to develop a country. And so providing that sort of underpinning, that sort of grounding in terms of who we are as Dominicans, not somebody born in the 90s or the 80s or so forth, in the 70s and all the way back, not somebody born in a particular era and only having a limited view. Because what happens is people simply assume that what they know is what is the reality. They logically, they know that there are other realities, but emotionally and psychologically, people do get locked in to the particular era and see it as the most relevant reality. This is especially a problem now in Dominica, where young people have, under the age of 30, I think, pretty much, maybe 35, have pretty much locked into a certain psychological and social mindset that has been shipped by the last 25 years. And so they view this as a very pertinent reality, and helping such young people reframe the conversation and reframe their way to frame reality of what can be and what is and what's acceptable, is really to introduce this sort of historical long view, so that the snapshot that they perceive as reality is extended, and to some extent help them to change the frames of which they have that drives the conversations that they have. And so this is, I think, a critical aspect. It is a crying shame that we do not have history being taught in our schools to create that sort of fundamental understanding that is necessary to any progressive nation. When I moved to study in the United States, it was a prerequisite at every year that I attended school, pretty much. I had to take a course in American history and American constitutionalism. And in Dominica, we simply pay no heed to that whatsoever. I could ask any 80s, 90s, 2000s baby the most basic of questions, and I've done it many times on historical consciousness, and they really have no idea. So they don't even know, for the most part, about Mary Eugenia Charles, far less for Edward Oliver Leblanc. And so that is the sort of neglect that has happened over the past 20 years, because there's not a certain level of understanding or care or concern, really, to what it takes to develop a nation. But those like Edward Oliver Leblanc, who understood the importance of consciousness, the importance of being grounded in self, national pride, dealing with issues of inferiority complexes from the eras of slavery and colonialism, understanding these dynamics need to be addressed in a newly free post-colonial country, understand that these dynamics are important. He understood that intuitively. And that was a man who had not gone on to do any advanced education or political theory. But he understood that political and economic development was built on a foundation of strong community. He understood that political and economic advancement was built on social cohesion. And he understood that providing opportunity to the marginalized is the way that you expand your economy. He understood those things very well, as was explained in the policies that he undertook. He not only undertook economic policies, he undertook policies to create a sense of pride in our own local culture, and in the small man being an important voice. And that is what is missing in our dialogue, honestly, and in our leadership. And if you look at it over time, our leadership has declined, deteriorated from a philosophical understanding. Edward Oliver Leblanc had a philosophical understanding of what was necessary to make a developing country progress. He had an intuitive philosophical understanding. He was a philosopher king. And that is the sort of approach that a developing country that's going to be successful needs. We need philosopher kings, in a sense. We need people who understand at the intuitive and the intellectual level that development is multidimensional. Yes, you have economic aspects to it, but you certainly have social, psychological aspects to it that may be even more important. And the particular mindset that you cultivate and grow and the sort of communities that you build create a certain culture that can either be conducive to development or destructive to development. And so what we see over time in Dominica, if you look at the history, is really a pendulum swing between two forces in my mind. There are those liberated, liberal thinking philosopher kings who care about community and nation building. And then there are those who are looking to take advantage of an impoverished country or an economically vulnerable country to advance themselves. Because in every developing country, in every country that's growing, those who are clever and seek to attack a young democracy can do so. Their democracy is never perfect. There's always the possibilities to outsmart it. And we faced that dynamic through the history of Dominica. We swing the pendulum. So we went from Edward Oliver Leblanc, who was this person interested in the greater good. We swung over to Patrick John, who was arguably more interested in self-advancement and self-promotion. We swung the pendulum back in the Mary Eugenia Charles era to a focus on accountable government and doing things for the country, and again, a more enlightened approach to national development. And then the pendulum swung back to this current era of Roosevelt Skerritt, who has taken this to a whole new level in terms of capturing the society. But the same dynamic has played out over time in Dominica. And so what we have to ask ourselves is, well, in this 21st century, in this modern era, what do we need to do as leaders, not only political leaders, but leaders across the spectrum, to understand the dynamics that allow us to be vulnerable and to be taken advantage of and to go down those alleys time and time again? And how do we need to address that and to change the conversation and to restructure the society and to re-legislate the society in a way that leads us to the sort of flourishing outcomes that we really deserve as a society? And I mean, it has been discussed, it has been presented, it has been fully dialogued on what the Roosevelt Skerritt administration is doing right now. There is no need for me to go into a whole litany of the wrongs that are done, but let us look at maybe one thing. There has never been an era in Dominica's history where so little has been done with so much. You can look back and you can say, well, these people, we were trying to do this, we were trying to develop, we were trying to do those things. And folks now will say, well, look, Skerritt is building some apartments, isn't that a good thing? And adding a little to the hotel rooms here and the hospital and so on, and he's paving the roads. He's doing the good thing, the great things. Good things. These are good things. The country is doing well. But you have to have the correct context for this. This is being done in the context of the greatest amount of monies that has ever in the history of the island made its way to our shores. Billions of dollars, US dollars. And in that context, what is being done is not only unacceptable, it's almost criminal, right? So Dominica has found itself in another classical situation that occurs to developing countries. It's the resource curse. Countries that are blessed with abundant natural resources, they simply extract those resources and the funds come directly to the government. They don't have to tax the citizenry. They don't have to appeal to the citizenry. They don't have to develop policies that makes the citizenry responsive and grow and therefore taxable. They don't have to grow the economy because that's not where the funds come from. Saudi Arabia is the same thing. They have a captive society because they have an independent source of wealth. They don't need to grow the wealth together with the community. And that's just a classical resource curse situation in political economy. And that's what we have going on in Dominica. With the wealth of the passports that are pouring in like oil revenues into Dominica, this gives the political party an enormous ability to capture not only the state, but to capture the entire society. And so today we live in a captured society. Nothing that Edward Oliver Leblanc would have envisioned for us as a community, nothing surely he envisioned when he stepped away from leadership and hoped to pass the baton on to a continue of our political development process. But that has not happened. In fact, our political process development has been rolled back more than 30 years. And that is the context, the political context that we have to find ourselves in today. And that's what we have to address. But we have always prospered. The people have always come through and swung the pendulum back. And I am counting that the time is ripe, the time is correct, that leadership coalesce with the people to right this wrong and return us back, swing the pendulum back the other way.
Bernard, thank you sincerely for this. That was very deep and very inspiring. Kent, I want to hold you back a little bit. I want to go back to Dr. Irving Andre for a brief moment to make some comments on some of the things that Bernard just said. Because when I come to you, Kent, I want you to spend some time to give us, because I know that you are heading NJAM, and NJAM is doing stuff. In other words, some of what Bernard is saying, and we have been talking about NJAM, he said, we want to help to go ahead and do just those things there. So I want to come back to, let me go back to Dr. Andre. Dr. Andre, you heard Bernard and you put it in the context. You heard Lennox, you heard Thomson. I believe there's a lot more that you can tell us about that era. And I mean, you have a whole book on that, for God's sake. And this man, Leblanc, what his philosophy, I mean, his love for people. Everything he did, like, it was centered around people. It was for people. He never did anything for himself. This man never asked for a mansion. This man never asked how much money to take care of himself and his family every month. He said, I don't want a shirt, fathers, for a mansion on a hill. This man didn't say, I want to be there for 50 years, and when I leave, I want my children to succeed. He didn't say that. He said, I'm leaving now, and I'm handing over to somebody else. That's what he said. Dr. Andre, I mean, help us a little bit more on this man called Edward Oliver Leblanc and this famous book that he wrote. I hope every school can still take that up and put those books in the schools. Your mic is muted. If you can unmute your mic.
Thank you very much. And in fact, I'll just continue on the vein mentioned, on the vein established by Dr. Thomson Fontaine in that wonderful poem he read, and by the other contributions that Mr. Ito has said, the Philosophy King, because that gives us an insight into the type of leader that we had then. Now, he didn't cherish or covet wealth in the fashion that we think of. That is to say, the accoutrement of success, the big fancy vehicle, probably borrowed from the United States, as shown on TV, the endless security guards, and what comes with it, the vulgar mansion amidst a sea of poverty. What he cherished was a value system which reflected a deep faith in a messianic hope that he can bring change. I mean, Dr. Fontaine read this poem. Let me just read the last verse of a poem he wrote in 1973 called Nom Noir, the Black Man. It's almost an instruction. It's like Tiresias in Sophocles' Antigone. And being an old-fashioned poet myself, I can appreciate it. But here's what he wrote. Although your hands are still tied behind your back, your mind is free, but liberty has its price. Your race and roots are not things to play with. Love all, but love your own much more. Not Montfared and Zambuli or whatever it is. Work hard, forgive, and pray your horizon is plain. Cut your own road. With courage, your own destiny to mold. This encapsulates the philosophy of this man, and it is reflective in all his policies. We talked about the road building, we talked about the scholarships, we talked about the engineering of production, incentives to hotels, local hotels, Castaways, Island House, Astor, Cicero, Layu, River La Croix, Anchorage, Springfield, Fort Young. many of them owned by some of his political adversaries or enemies, because he understood as clearly as anyone could that when rain falls, it falls on everyone's house. When adversity strikes, it doesn't strike on the basis of color. It doesn't strike on the basis of affiliation. So to high tides lift up every boat was his basic philosophy. And when you think of the poem Thomson read about, you can see his focus. You could see who he was preoccupied with. The lepers of his day, economic. Those we dismiss as prostitutes. Those, as I said, who couldn't afford the means. Village councils, the empowerment of persons who felt they had no role in governance. That's what he did, empowering village councils, engendering local self-government, a national provident fund, the precursor to the social fund, whatever they call it right now. He embraced the Kalinago people. I didn't talk about that in the first book, but I just had to do a revamping of the book for the University of Toronto, quite frankly. And he adopted two policies with respect to the Kalinago, which may appear, at least in retrospect, we could see the merit of it. One, he was fearful that unscrupulous persons would take advantage of the Kalinago people by plying them with trifles. And to use a Shakespearean expression, by using trifles to win them over, to rip them off. So he was fearful of giving too much self-governance to them at that point. The situation may be different now. And secondly, the leadership of the Kalinago people in the 60s in particular, they had a policy. If a Kalinago male got involved or married a non-Kalinago woman, then he can come and live happily ever after in the Kalinago territory. But if a Kalinago woman got married to a non-Kalinago man, then she was deprived of the same privilege. And that type of inequality affected him deeply. And he felt that if he gave the Kalinago territory unbridled self-governance, then he would usher in a period of inequality and exploitation, quite frankly, based on gender and also based on economics. So it may appear today to be patronizing, because so many persons of our Kalinago friends have gone on to education and succeeded tremendously in terms of academic pursuits. But it's interesting because I was listening to a program on your station, Mr. G, and Annette Sanford, very articulate, brilliant young woman, was talking about even the leadership today and the problems that still haunt the landscape of the Kalinago territory. The self-aggrandizement, the leader who helps himself to 30,000 pieces of silver. We're not talking theory here. We're talking about the history. We're talking about how all those values of Leblanc have been corroded and polluted, and how those values, that pollution, has metastasized, and it affects and afflicts every tissue, every organ of the body politic. So this is the monumental task we now face. I mean, imagine that. A leader of the country, and we're talking about the wealth that he craved, the values that he craved in opposed to material wealth, would leave his home at 10 o'clock in the night and go to Newtown, one of his buddies, married to one of his relatives. I think it was Inspector Evander Joseph. I'm not sure about the first name. And they would go to fish. And Evander Joseph, I had occasion to speak to him about that. And Leblanc would sit on that boat with his pipe as the glint of moonlight bathed the stillness of the night, and he would just think about his mission and what he had to do. When he retreated to Hurtault, he similarly would spend hours and hours on end going to fish in a little canoe without even an engine. cultivate the land he had, and it was not much. And that gave him the type of identity and responsibility and the centrality that is so conspicuous by its absence today. That is what we've engendered. That is what we should reclaim. And Libla wasn't a perfect vessel. He had his own political struggles. Evidenced, for example, by the passage of the so-called Shut Your Mouth Bill in 68. Evidenced by the strife he experienced in 73 thereabouts with the state of emergency. His encounters and his confrontations with the unions of today. But today in 2022, we can look back at history and we can say many of these leaders who fought against Libla were not altruistic vessels. They were not paragons of virtue. They were not actors who did not act without self-interest. We can look at it today and we can understand that, because some of the leaders of the 70s, quite frankly, have become some of the oppressors of the 2020s. So today we have a much better understanding of this leader than we had in the 60s and than we had in the 1970s. And that is why we have to meditate, and I agree with Bernardito, we have to meditate on our history, and we have to learn the lessons and the failures and the shortcomings. And we have to be inspired by that history because we can do better. Thank you.
Now, thank you so much, Dr. Andre. Kent, you've been listening to all of this. I mean, you've listened to Dr. Andre again, you heard Dr. Fontaine, you heard Lennox, Linton, you heard Bernard. How does all of this strike you, Kent? When you look at that era, look at the man, his philosophy, his policies, the strategies he used to lift people up, while he himself and his family remained humble. Very modest means. This is what Dr. Andre is telling us. This is a man who was writing poetry. He's a man who was protecting the culture. The whole Creole thing we're talking about today, he's a man who was preserving that, ensured that we have that today. How does it strike you, Kent, when you see what is happening today compared to what was happening before? And after Kent, after you, I will ask Lambi, let's take a few calls, because I'm pretty sure there's people who want to join us in the conversation tonight. Kent, let me open up your mic. Let me go over to you right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And good evening to everyone, all the listeners and all the panelists. Good evening. I was really listening carefully. Well, carefully is not the word really, but I was actually trapped or just inspired as Dr. Andre was speaking, listening very intently. And I could only just compare what he was saying. And before I came on the show, I was looking at a site and looking at what in Philippines, they put forward as the qualities that they would like in a leader. And there are many other sites that talk about the qualities of good leadership. So through all the conversation, I'm just listening and I'm just saying, wow, this was indeed a leader, a great leader with all the elements that you would see in the literature: the accountability, respect, humility, honesty. All of these things are what we just spoke about. Independence, wisdom, courage, compassion for the people, and his commitment, his love, all of this. That is what all of these things brought up in me, and I'm like, wow. And then I paid a bit of attention to what, let's put it as the results that Andre spoke about and Thomson supported. When I say the results, when you lead towards certain ends. You lead to develop your people. You lead to bring your people up. So you already spoke about the kinds of results that he got. And when you have to judge leadership, you have to judge it by the results that they produce. And I listened carefully to the results, and they were amazing in terms of the banana boom and the production and the deliberate policy and the educational programs. I don't have to repeat it. It was said so nicely by Dr. Andre and by Fontaine. But there was results. But that's what good leadership does. Every good leader, under every good leader, there is progress. Progress is made and you can see it and you can measure it and there is no doubt. And you can look back at our history in Dominica and you will see that. And you will see the leaders that are not good and you can also judge it by the result. But I have to bring it to my own recollections because remember, when Dr. Andrew gave the dates that he reigned from 61 to 74, I'm like, okay, in 61 I was not born yet. And in 74 I was wrong, but by that time I would have been about 8 years old, but enough to remember what I saw. And the years after, before 1980, before the Hurricane 79, on the Patrick John, it was really a building of the legacy that Libla had raised. A lot of the things were already in place, and he did not reverse them. There was a good foundation that was kept and maybe even built on. And I'm like, wow. And I had to try to remember, not try, it easily came back because I remembered how our country was in terms of the agriculture boom that was happening. I recall that. I recall those days. I mean, our relatives could not come down to our house. It wasn't required of them, but anytime they would come with all of this food. You know, I remember the boom that was happening in agriculture at this time. But I especially remember the manufacturing. I know, Sheridan, you were involved at many times in many companies by Trini and others. But I remember those years when we had so many trade shows and expos. I remember those days. There was, and Andre mentioned all the different things that happened, but we were doing so much. He was following, as you said, Andre, the industrialization by invitation and import substitution. That was the going theory, the economic theory of the day, led by the eminent Sir Arthur Lewis. And clearly, at that time, Dominica was a leader. Sheridan, I'm sure you can remember. We were one of the leading countries, even in tourism. I remember some of our discussions that there was a time when some hotel that wanted to set up and in Dominica. I don't remember the details of the story, but Dominica, it may have been under him. It may have been under. I'm not sure under whom, but it may have been under him when they were sort of turned down for some reason, and they went to Antigua, and Antigua grabbed it, and it's from there Antigua's tourism picked up. But remember, at that time, we had great tourism. We not great, I mean, compared for the day, for its time. I remember the hotels, Astor Hotel and the Fort Young before that, and there were a number of other hotels. And it seems like Dominica was at the forefront in many areas. That was the result of good leadership under Libla. That was the result of what was continued in the Patrick John era before 79, before he demitted office. That there were results in the economic sphere. There were clear results, and I'm sure if we were to go back to the statistics, we would see improvements in the quality of life. Would see improvements in the level, or decreases in the level of poverty and so on. I don't have the statistics before me, but clearly there were results from everything we are saying, and from my own recollection, I know life was getting better and better at that time. I remember I grew up in that just around that time. And on the social front, there were results. Dr. Andre, you mentioned culture, and culture is one of the things we misunderstand. And maybe we misunderstand because we didn't know exactly why Libra introduced it. And we became, accustomed to the dance, and we just consider culture to be the dance and culture to be the clothes. I guess we got so accustomed, but we forgot the reasons. But notice he introduced it as a means of having people have confidence in themselves. He was changing the culture. That's a leader who understands the role of culture. We have forgotten that. And I have sought to advise many countries the importance of culture. It's not just about the dance. And Dominica was a leader in those areas, but the reasons we did it in terms of dance and all of that, I mean, we were the envy of the Caribbean in terms of many countries are following us and trying to do what we do. Even today, I see countries trying to institute some of the cultural things we have, the wear, the national dress, and so on, that we long had. But the reason for doing it, Libla understood that very well. To empower people, to give people pride in themselves and dignity. That was so powerful. And today we don't understand that culture. There are many negative cultures that we have to reverse. And our leaders don't understand that. They only think of culture as the dance and they forget the reason for it. But beyond the dance and so on, there are other cultural things that we got to reverse. But there was a leader who understood these deep things. And it was amazing to listen. And community development. We were a leader in the Caribbean area, leader in culture, leader in community development. Oh, let me go back to culture. Don't forget the rich culture of our music. I remember, I'm bringing the practical memory back to what we're saying. We had set this great foundation in Dominica. Oh, last, what has happened to us? And the community, how we built our communities, the community togetherness, the way we built up local government. I have been reviewing some of the countries and, all the countries in some work I'm doing. And they are nowhere where we used to be. And they are very much interested now in developing local government, many of them. Some of them have it in place. And there's more that can be done. But we were a leader in that area. And rather than bring it up to the next level, community participation, local government, to the level where communities would play a more active role in organizing economic activity, to create better diversification and better tourism products and so on in our communities. Rather than taking it to the next level, what we have done is destroyed it. Destroyed community cohesion, destroyed community leadership, politicize it, over-politicize it, let me say, because there's always an element of politics in everything, if we're honest. But we have reversed the progress that we made then, which could have served us well going forward, which many countries are now trying to do and have the opportunity to build and get past us. And in many of those things, what I see is that we were the leaders, we fell, and we have been overtaken in almost every area, in culture, in community. We were the leaders because of good leadership. We have been overtaken now because of bad leadership. And it hurts. It hurts. It really do hurt. And we can return to those days with better leadership. I mean, the goodness spirit thrive.
Kent, here's what I want to say. As you're going ahead, this thing is getting so interesting, and the way you're bringing it out now and relating it to what's happening today, you're creating that bridge. It's so interesting. I really I just want to come back to you, but I want to just let Lambi know that why we're gonna make a conversation going forward.
Yes.
We're not gonna make it present. We'll make it a conversation. I hope Lennox and Thomson will just join us for the next phase of this conversation among themselves about all of this, because we need to now dialogue about it. But I want to embrace our listeners as well. So Lambi, if any calls come in, give the people the numbers now. And if any calls are coming, you'll just interrupt, make me a sign. Let's take the calls. Let's make sure that we can hear the callers, because I believe there might be people who might want to engage in that phase, in that aspect of our conversation. So let me go over to you now, Lambi.
The numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. And the lines are open. You make a call. We'll pass it back to Mr. G.
Yes, and thank you so much, Lambi, for that. So listen, just I'll keep my eye on you, Lambi. Just make me a signal. If you have a call, I'll just take it right away. If you have a call now, I'll take it.
Yes, we do. Caller on the overseas line, please go ahead.
I want to hear the callers, Lambi. I'm not hearing.
Yeah, I'm not hearing the caller either. Caller, are you there? No, the caller is not responding, so you may carry on.
All right, so Kent, let's go ahead, and if we get another call, I hope you don't mind if Lambi interrupts.
No, it's okay. We'll take the calls as they come. And then the strides in education you mentioned, and then the strides in health. Again, we were a leader in primary health care in the Caribbean. Many countries tried to emulate what we were doing, But that foundation was created then under Libya, continued on the good leaders that continued after. What's happening now? A reversal. And for all the Caribbean countries, most of them at least, all as a matter of fact, from the 1980s, maybe before, where life expectancy was about 69 years, that has steadily increased in all the countries to now where it's 70 something in most countries, 74, 75 in most. Barbados is at the top with about 79 years, and Dominica is somewhere close to the top with about, well, I'm not sure the exact number now, but at one point a couple of years ago we were very high, and maybe we were actually a few years ago we were the leader, we were ahead of Barbados as far as I knew, and I don't seem to be able to get all the statistics. But what seemed to be happening is that our health statistics have been reversed. I was comparing how Dominica is doing.
Let's take a call, Ken. Yeah. Let's take a call. Lambi wants to. Go ahead, Lambi.
Caller, please go ahead on the overseas line.
Yes. Good evening, Lambi, and good evening to Mr. G and the team.
That sounds
very
like
emotional.
Yeah, that sounds like a
very
gentleman.
Emotional listen to.
I was saying, caller. That sounds like a gentleman who knows a lot about agriculture.
Yes, Mr. G, I got started with Mr. Libla. I was a member of the team that was appointed to provide extension and support to the farmers by Mr. Libla. And this was the beginning of the successful development of the banana industry. Under the leadership of Mr. Patrick Deloney, we started in 1972, and we were providing education and support to farmers at that time. I mean, it's very emotional to know the path Dominica had in those days and how people were empowered to go out and achieve. Mr. Libna transformed rural Dominica by two things: providing land, providing feeder roads, and establishing buying depots in every community. And this made farmers made money. People didn't want any handout. They went out there and they were able to build themselves and their family because of those policies. Direct investment in the people. Thank you very much, and I'm listening.
Yes, indeed. All right. Good.
So, I'm hoping that you were still there, caller. Are you gone? Are you there still? Okay, it looks like you've missed it. But I wanted to ask him, maybe he can call back or somebody else can call. But let's take a call from Lambi.
Caller, please go ahead. It's your turn.
Can you hear me clearly?
Just raise your voice a little louder.
We're hearing you very well.
Clearly?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Dominicans have lost the culture. You hear me?
We are hearing you. Go ahead.
Dominicans have lost their culture under this government, the culture of love. They have lost it. Even our policemen we used to look up to very well, and our policemen were loving policemen. Now instead of love, our policemen become murderers, killing their own black brothers. This is the culture that this government have given us. This government can never follow the culture of Libya because they have greed in their heart. The devil is dancing in their heart. Money is their heart. Their heart is made of money, and there is no love. When you used to go to a neighbor before and you tell a neighbor, look, I haven't got sugar, give me some sugar, they will give you. You know what they will tell you now? Go to Lennox, to Linton, because this is what this government, Roosevelt carried government have brought Dominicans to beggars and haters. And when I speak sometimes on the radio, people meeting me on the road and challenge me, tell them I say I am not afraid of them because I am a pure born Dominican, not like the Prime Minister that is a Frenchman. Thank you.
And thanks a lot, Carl. But I would just say one thing, that I don't think policemen are murderers. I think that's a broad brush statement. I want to apologize for that, but I certainly appreciate some of your comments. Lambi, let's take another call.
Not like the Prime Minister that is a Frenchman.
On the overseas line, caller, please go ahead.
Yes, good evening.
Go ahead, please.
Good evening.
Yes, well, Lambi, this is Dion, George. I want to say a very thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Dr. Andre, to Ken, to Bernard, and to Mr. Linton, and to everybody. A couple points I would like to say. I really appreciate Dr. Andre historical background of the Prime Minister. I thought that it included a lot of economics as well, apart from the history and apart from his policies. You know, when he spoke of import substitution and export, that was very good. And I thought Bernard really captured not just the economics, but Bernard also captured the philosophy behind it. And I think the point that Bernard made, which really touched me, is the fact that he mentioned that economics is good and policy is good, but also social policies and philosophy and psychology and having a philosophical framework for development. I thought he hit that on the head. And of course, you know, Dr. Thomson, Fontaine, always on point. And even my good friend, Mr. Lennox, Linton. I just want to mention recently, I mean, it's not on the program tonight, but we were talking about China. And then he came on the hot seat with I forgot his name, the guy who's hosting the program there.
Zariman.
The issue of China came up, yeah. And I thought Mr. Linton hit that nail on the head, you know, and something he said that really touched me, which I somewhat agree with. He said that that, you know, it's okay to deal with China. And I thought the issue of racism came up. And what I thought was poignant about his point, he said that, I mean, China have 1.5 billion people. So, of course, you can expect persons to be racist. But fundamentally, he said that if you are dealing with international relations and dealing with countries, at the bottom line is it has to do with your relationship, your agenda, and what you want to get from that relationship. So I thought that was good. The gentlemen, I just want to say that I think the program tonight is very deep. I think you guys are hitting on different edges, but ultimately, I think this is really good. And I want to thank you so much for service to the country.
And Dr. George, I want to thank you for your call and hope that you will be with us next week when we speak about our first Prime Minister, Honorable Patrick Rowland John, because next week we speak about our first Prime Minister, Patrick Rowland John. So thank you, Dr. George. Lambi, you want to take the call?
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks. Good.
Thank you. Have a good one. Go ahead, Lambi.
Caller, go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you. Go ahead.
Lambi Evans John.
Yes.
Is this Lambi?
Yes, it's Lambi. Go ahead, Mr. John.
I can speak now?
Go right ahead.
This is Evans John.
Is very low. His audio is very low, you know.
Mr. John, your audio is very low. Raise your voice a little bit, but I'm hearing you, so go ahead, please.
I think his telephone might be giving him a problem. Yes, maybe he should call back. I think his phone is having an issue, Lambi. You want to take another call, Lambi, before I go back to Kent? Let's go over to Kent, and if there's a call coming, you'll just interrupt us again. Kent, okay. You see, once you start talking, everybody gets excited. No, right?
Well, thank God for that. So I was talking about the health, and we seem to be regressing. So we do not have the information on the life expectancy very, very recent, but I was beginning to get the impression by what some folks were saying that we seem to have reversed it a little bit, unfortunately. And as a matter of fact, I was looking at the health statistics on, and it's maybe representative of what's happening in the entire health sector, but the statistics on infant mortality and neonatal mortality, under 5 mortality. And Dominica is the only CARICOM CDF country where those figures have deteriorated between, let me get the years correct. I think it's between up to 2018 and 2010 or so. about a 5 or 10 year period or so. It actually deteriorated. The only country we had a deterioration. At one point, we were on par with Barbados and the others, and even a little better than some of the Caribbean countries. Now we are among the worst on those scores, those free scores, by far. Not worse by a little bit, I'm not talking about worse by a little, worse by far. So what we have is our social architecture, the things that contribute to social cohesion. They were raised, they were improved under good leadership of Libra. The great foundation was set and continued under other good leaders, or who at least maintained what we had, or improved, like under Mary Charles, and been reversed under bad leadership. And then we could talk about in the environment. Well, housing, you spoke about housing, and housing is an important area. It's a very important area, and he was very conscious of that. But it wasn't just a consciousness of a housing as a bribe. It wasn't just a consciousness of housing as, as it's done now. It was a consciousness that hardworking people need to be given some sort of assistance. Have a call? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I suspect that might be Mr. John again. Caller, please go ahead.
Hello. He's probably having some telephone issues, Lambi. All right. So
right.
So I guess when he's able to call, he'll call back.
All right. Now there were results as well under the environment. Again, growing up, going to primary school, secondary school, we all recall that strong emphasis on the environment, that environmental consciousness that was in us as Dominicans. We sang about it in our cultural songs, and we also lived it in the way we enjoyed our environment. And also the whole system of national parks and so we were ahead of our time, so to speak. We were practicing sustainable development even before the words became popular, because we were addressing on the Libra the economic element, the social element, and the environment element that was maintained under other good government. But that seemed to be reversed.
And resilience as well, not just.
Oh yes,
remember, even in the construction of our homes, some of the houses were much more resilient.
Exactly. But we seem to have had reversals under all of the spheres. I've mentioned some of the others already, but even under the environment, the abuse of our rivers, the way in which there's uncontrolled dumping of equipment and all of that. It seems like it's been reversed. But good leaders produce good results, and we saw that on the Libra. And that was what struck me most from listening to Dr. Irving, and then strengthened by Thomson.
But Bernard, as I said, you see, Kent is trying to tell us he's a young fellow. But I know that you are younger. And all of this, I mean, what kind of impression, what kind of impact that is having on you? Because you see, there's a whole generation of people who may be 35 years or thereabouts, who really don't understand any of this. They don't know that there were better days. They don't know that there was good leadership. They don't know that there were people who were not self-centered and selfish and just looking for themselves. They don't know that there were leaders who just looked out for the people at the great sacrifice to themselves and to their own families. They don't know that there were leaders who were so interested in culture that they laid the foundation on which to build cultural industries, which today we really have not progressed too much on, because I still hear our musicians and our entertainers complaining they need support, especially during this pandemic. They need support, and they don't seem to be getting enough of it, if any at all. So, Bernard, I wanted to just, get from you your own thoughts, looking at all of this, looking at this era. That's your generation there, looking at that, what is happening. What the impression and the impact that has on you would obviously be similar to what it would have on people of your age group. So tell us a little bit more about how you feel about all of that.
Sure. I'm a little behind Kent, but there are certainly a whole new generation now, the internet babies, millennials that have their own perspective. But I certainly think I broach those generations there. And I mean, as I said earlier, the important thing is the what I observe when I travel around and I talk to young folks and I engage with them and we sit and we rap, is really the sense of complete lack of awareness of an alternative Dominica, a complete lack of awareness of a continuity of a Dominica. We seem to be very trapped. The young generation seems to be very trapped in the now. The idea of a nation that extends back hundreds of years with a sense of continuity and self, a sense of nationalism, is very absent. I mean, the United States is certainly not any model country in many ways, but in terms of a sense of George Washington and the cherry tree and all the sense of self, of what it is to be American and how it ties back to the founding fathers, how it ties back to the American Revolution, how it ties back to the Civil War, and how it ties through the generations and the 60s movements and so on. There is a palpable sense of self there. And that is, to me, one of the biggest failures and failings, even under the Eugenia Charles administration. There certainly was a failure in my mind to fully realize the need to build that national spirit. For all the shortcomings or all the missteps that were taken in the 70s, the late 70s, with the Black Power movement, the sense of consciousness of Black Dominican self, or the sense of Dominican sense, and as you said so wisely, Mr. LeBlanc was probably, as he claimed, the first Black Power movement individual. The sense of self, of a national self, as a people of African descent, striving to create a bubble in the world where they were self-sufficient and proud and prosperous and progressive and doing all the right things and going along the path of functional political development rather than dysfunctional political development, as has been seen in many of the other places in the Black world. There was a sense of a Pan-Africanism, a sense of that, and a movement in those directions. But to me, the real tragedy, certainly our economics is greatly impacted by this government, but to me the greatest tragedy is the destruction of the social fabric, the community fabric of Dominica. As the caller rightly pointed out, the fact that we are so splintered that we can't cooperate on the simplest things now. And this was a deliberate strategy crafted by a mercenary type political advisors to this current regime that understood the psychology of splitting people's loyalties along tribal lines to win elections. And the current government went along with that. In order to win elections, they were willing to sacrifice the social capital of our country. And they have destroyed the social capital of trust, of cooperation, of investing in community, of fairness, a sense of fairness, a sense that entrepreneurs can be successful even if they are of a different party. When you destroy those incentive structures, and when you destroy that social fabric, you are in fact destroying the very human and social capital that it takes to generate economic wealth. Economic wealth is nothing more than a society and a community that can cooperate and work together and have the right incentive structure in its institutions to incentivize people to create and feel that they are wealthy and happy and free and can and a sense of free will to determine their own destiny. And so when you destroy that sense of social capital, that sense of self, that sense of identity, which started under Edward LeBlanc in full thrust with a very deliberate, as we said, philosophical framework on what it would take for us to become an independent, producing, productive people. He understood that. He understood that well, and he was on the path to creating that. And so that social capital, the loss of that social capital over the past 25 years, and the loss of creating, what a wonderful opportunity for an enlightened leader to create a sense of community. Go ahead.
Would you like to interrupt us, take a call? No? You want to take a call, Lambi? If you do, go right ahead.
Yes,
Sure.
caller, please go ahead.
Yeah, can I speak?
Go right ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Evans John, retired police officer. I
Yeah.
joined the police service in 1961, the era of Hugh Leblanc. And I knew him
Yes, we
before
did, Carlos.
because he's an agricultural officer in the Collier district.
Okay. He got through.
My
He
family.
was trying to call the program. And
As a police officer, he used to come to police headquarters, play bridge, draft, and pools. I remember as a detective in 1965, we had difficulty in transportation, and I was investigating a crime. And I went to the recreational and requested assistance from a vehicle, and he gave me his personal vehicle. And I detected that crime, and I was also around during his departure as a result of the transfer of Papa D to DBS, and I was part of the riot squad. And Mr. Leblanc, I remember also the road to Collier, which they say was impossible. And he decided there must be roads to connect villages. And Gel Lyon was dismantled and access came to Collier and then to Portsmouth via the interior of Collier syndicate. When there was a slide in Debuash, no road to Caribou Reserve, Hostel and other taxi drivers used to pass through the heights of Collier to go to the airport. Mr. Leblanc, I know, focused on the poor people. He mingled with a lot of underprivileged persons, and he makes sure that the country developed through the social, the social system. Everybody knew what was to be done, and everybody assisted each other. And his son became a close friend of my brother, that is one of his sons, and his daughter, I brought her into the Lions Club. We are still friends today, and the legacy of Mr. Leblanc will always be remembered. Mr. Andre is supposed to meet me. We have a lot of information to give you.
But Irving, yes, I don't want you to go yet. Is that Evans John? Is he gone, Lambi?
he's still there. Go ahead, Mr. John. You've been addressed.
Is that Mr. Evans John? I'm not sure he's hearing me, Lambi, but
he did indicate that at the beginning.
Yes, but basically, it's somebody that people should know about. I mean, and after Irving Andre, he said you need to meet him sometime to talk about Edward Leblanc. But after Andre, let me go over to you now. But as I go to you, Dr. Andre, and I'm going to go back to Ken after for some solutions, because that is why I want him to come back to NJAM. Dr. Andrew, when we look at that era, and after all the things that you said, that Lennox said, Thomson said, and I hope Thomson and Lennox can join us when we close up, because I'm pretty sure they might want to add some more value before we wind up. And then you listen to what Kent and Bernard had to say. Do you think, after having studied the Leblanc era, and now you look at our city, would you say that we now have a crisis of governance?
Well, there's no question. There's no question about that, quite frankly. Of course, we do have a crisis of governance. We have a crisis of values, quite frankly. We've lost that loving feeling, if I may borrow a phrase of part of the verse of D.N. Warwick. We've lost that loving feeling, and it will take much. It will take serious leadership, visionary leadership, transformational leadership to recapture that loving feeling that is, in fact, almost the engine or the fuel of development in Dominica. From a biblical perspective, what is the saying? No house can stand if it's not built on a solid foundation. And that is where we are right now. To the extent that Dominicans are feeling like strangers in their own home, to the extent that Dominicans standing on the side, looking at foreigners gain employment and acquire wealth at the expense of locals, to the extent that Dominicans are losing their businesses, to the extent that there are no jobs, or there is a paucity of jobs for graduates of secondary schools and the state college. That is clear and convincing evidence that we have lost that loving feeling. To the extent that people are identified on the basis. I remember I come to Dominica quite often, and a lady who worked with one of my wife's relatives said, he's one of them. In other words, he's a leprous soul. He's one of the cursed and the damned. Why? Because I have the audacity to suggest that I should have the freedom to support and to ventilate my views on what good governance is all about. Fortunately, there are still a significant number of Dominicans who are propelled by the same conviction that we can do better, that salvation is on the horizon if we're prepared to make the effort. So I applaud organizations that are putting themselves out there, whether it's NJAM, whether it's Monsevier, whether it's various political parties, whether it's CCM. I applaud them because they may not realize it. The salvation of Dominica is in their hands. You can have 1 million novenas, but if you don't have that concerted effort, you get nowhere. You'll be frozen like Lot's wife, looking back, cast in stone, without any vision for the future. Thanks.
And as I go back to Kent for some further thoughts, if Lambi, if you have any call, just call us and you want to take it, go right ahead, Lambi.
The caller on 95, please go ahead.
Good evening, Lambi.
Good evening.
And good evening to all the esteemed gentlemen you have in the house.
Good evening.
One thing about Mr. Leblanc, I have not heard them mention that Mr. Leblanc, in his time, he instituted back pay for the man on the street, the poor man. And that was something that helped the poor people in those days. They used to get that back pay, and after they get the back pay, they were able to build their homes and do a lot of things. And that is one of the good things of Mr. Leblanc.
Well said. Thank you very much.
Yes, Dr. Andre, you just learned a thing or two there?
I certainly learned because I could use the back pay myself, come to think of it.
I was going to make a case for you now, but you took in front. But just before I go back to Kent, I just wanted to I might only have time to read maybe one, just to acknowledge the folks who are on Facebook with us. So happy that you're with us tonight. Maybe I'll just have the time to read a part of one, at least from Marceline Edwards. She says, very interesting and informative program. Wish our political atmosphere would return to some semblance of the E.O. Leblanc sanity. But alas, it seems we have lost our way indefinitely. I seem to have recalled those words, they've lost their way, from a lady called Dame Eugenia Childs. About a year, I think, after the collision that she herself had got started. I think I heard her make that comment. She felt even at that time that things already were not going the right way that she had envisaged that she would. So Kent, I want to go over to you because we're coming now to a point where we're going to make our closing remarks. But before we do, I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about NJAM a little bit and what it is that you're doing to help solve some of these problems, this crisis of governance that we're talking about. We talk so much about electoral reform and campaign finance reform. We know it's a must. If you don't level a playing field, one group will just win all elections, hands down, and nobody else. And what do we have? Do we then have democracy? Or are we going to call it something else?
Right. Yes, and these things for a while now we have been talking about as a nation. And we know that it's important to get back to a position of good governance. If we were to get back to the E.O. Leblanc era, the E.O. Leblanc style of governance, then we need to reform our system because we have a government that is now, and mark it, we always had these laws, but we had honorable people. We had honorable men and women, and even if there were a few loopholes here, a few loopholes there, a few inconsistencies here, or a few things that, but the spirit, people understood the spirit of the law, and there was no attempt by previous governments, no significant attempt to ignore and to break the laws, the bribery laws and all of that. But we have come to a point where we have a government that's willing to do all of that. But thankfully, our people are beginning to realize that we've got to stop it. We've got to stop them from doing that. We've got to insist on the kinds of reforms or the kinds of strong actions that need to be taken to ensure that we have free and fair elections. We must accept nothing short of that. And NJAM is glad to be part of those who are trying to encourage the people to realize, let's do it as a nation, not as a freedom party, not as a UWP, not as a Munsewe, not as an NJAM in itself, but as a movement. All of us. If we all act, if we all say enough is enough, then it will happen. And that is, we are so glad about the rally we had yesterday. There was a lot of solidarity messages, and we will continue to build forward on this. But we also recognize, and just as Bernard is saying, that we have a generation that do not understand the successes of Libya, the importance of good government, that do not understand the successes of the previous good governments we've had, Mary Virginia Charles, and even the success we had under Patrick John. They do not understand that. They do not know better. What they know is the bribery and the treating and the victimization. So they remain quiet so that they receive some sort of bribe. That is the generation that we have. So therefore, we have to bring them hope. We have to begin to show them that there is a better way, that better can be done, that we can develop, that our government is not doing it, but it can be done. So while we are doing everything to bring people together, to stand together, to ensure that there's adequate electoral reform, that to ensure that there's free and fair elections, while we're doing that, we are also going to embark on strategies to begin to show people that we had success before and we can return it. So we are going to seek to inspire our people to succeed, at least to begin to set examples or to show, just because we recognize in a year that we cannot liberate all the people economically, but we need to empower people. But we recognize we can begin to sow seeds. We can begin to make them realize that better can be done. And we can do this by working with our farmers. We can bring our knowledgeable people together, our experienced people together. It's not going to be easy, you know. Nothing I'm saying here suggests that it's going to be easy. It's going to take sacrifice on the part of some of us. But this is the situation we're in, that it calls for an unusual effort, an effort that people, opposition parties or other individuals are not supposed to do. This is supposed to be the work of a government, but we do not have a government that's willing to do the work, or they are so interested in their own self-interest that they're ignoring the interest. They're not like the liberal that's really altruistic. They are interested in themselves. So because of this situation, because we want to save our country, we have come to the point where we have to begin to show this new generation that do not know better, that better can be done. So we are going to launch programs and bring our knowledgeable people together to show people that better can be done. That is what we are about. But we have to inspire our farmers. We have to organize our farmers. Again, there was a time when our farmers were well organized and we saw success out of proper organization. It's not going to be easy, but we've got to show farmers a different way, how to mix agriculture with livestock, how to mix that with some manufacturing, how to bring our manufacturers together, how to bring back the kind of pride in manufacturing. And I have to say, there are some people in Dominica who in spite of the fact that they're not actively supported by a government, I don't mean support in terms of handout, but in terms of the policy environment, in spite of the fact that they're doing everything they can. We have persons like Benjo Simos. We have persons doing herbal teas. We have persons doing wines. In spite of that, you know, it's not anywhere close to what we had before, because you had the right environment and the right encouragement from government. But we do have some persons who still want to do something in spite of the situation. So we've got to begin to work with them and help people organize and help people work together, help people join together. Because sometimes, for instance, what often happens is that there may be good ideas on how to make juice, but there may be several persons doing it. How do we bring people together? You know, those kinds of things NJAM is going to get into. How are we going to bring in, seek to bring in investors into our country? And if the CBI continues to be available, how are we going to seek to use the CBI to bring benefits to our farmers, bring tourism and farming together and use the CBI? And we are going to apply to be a user. And therefore, we will see whether they want to allow a bona fide, honest organization to do things on the behalf of the people. We're going to seek to find markets, find investors, work with the diaspora. We will not be able to do all of that quickly in 1 year. But the hope is that we can begin to set examples so that people can begin to think and they can say, but for true, better can be done. if we have proper organization, if we have proper governance, we hope to sow a seed in people's head that better can be to inspire them to continue and to help them to continue, but also to get them to realize, because they have no live example. So if we begin to give them a few examples, in addition to doing everything we can to educate them, like, and then that is exactly what we're going to do. And we have the next big thing that you will see, we will continue to put a lot of emphasis on bringing people together to ensure that there is electoral reform and ensure that there's free and fair elections. But you're going to see a lot very soon in terms of our program to seek to empower our people, empower our farmers, empower our manufacturers, empower our exporters to come together, to work together, to access information and skills from the diaspora and from those of us who are here, and to begin to show that Dominica can be different. We can get back to those days, and we will start it now. In spite of this government, we will start it. And when better governance comes with free and fair elections, we'll be in a better place to run with that.
So Ken, thank you for that. And but so I think I hear you saying, you didn't quite say that, but I seem to hear you saying that maybe we want to come back to that kind of democracy which we had in the days of LeBlanc, which is kind of similar to what we have here in Canada right now. In fact, I heard recently, Irving, our own Prime Minister was grilled very soundly by a gentleman who has aspirations to become the leader of the Conservative Party. And but let me just take they grilled him, and this is the democracy. The Prime Minister had to stay there and take it. This is the democracy.
So the speaker didn't interrupt by accusing him of having imputing improper motives?
No, he didn't. He didn't do it. Well, if he did that, he must have done it so secretively that he didn't want us to hear it. But we never heard him say that. But let me just take one brief comment. Because I did something on Facebook. I want to take one on WhatsApp. And somebody says, here's one example existing in Canada, Commonwealth member state, why we need stronger ethics, integrity in public office legislation, as well as public administration and management laws that holds public officials accountable to the citizenry of the Commonwealth of Dominica. It says, let's advocate and take action for the passage of a Dominica Public Accounts Committee Act, a restructured Integrity in Public Office Act that truly holds public officials, such as the Prime Minister, the Cabinet of Ministers, Secretary to Cabinet, Financial Secretary, Chief Personnel Officer, or the permanent secretaries and heads of departments accountable to the people of this country for their stewardship. Dominica is ours to save. Let us do it now. Enough is enough. That is a comment that just came through on WhatsApp. There's many, many more comments, but I thought I would just read one because in the interest of time. I wanted to go over to you, Bernard, to sort of give us your closing remarks. We're coming down now to the wire. So if you can open your mic and give us your closing comments and your winding up remarks.
Well, thank you again, Mr. G, and thanks to all the panelists for a stimulating dialogue and a stimulating discussion. As I said at the beginning, I think we are creating the sort of community that we wish to see in the future, but we can start now by what we're doing together, having those dialogues, understanding each other respectfully, understanding that we need a philosophical and a legal framework for our society, understanding that we have to think deliberately and consciously about how we develop a country. A developing country is an interesting thing, and it takes new, innovative, creative, dedicated leadership to get it to the next phase. It is a fragile duckling that has to be nurtured and built. It is not an established democracy that can resist too much, and you must fix the boat while you're rowing it to that destination. And so it takes a certain type of leadership, a certain type of insight, a certain type of consciousness and deliberateness to build and to develop a developing country to the next level. And as I have said, we have swung between those who got that, those who understood that, those who understood that it was not primarily economic, it is primarily an issue of social structure and opportunity and fairness. And then you simply free the natural, intuitive creativity and industriousness of people to then build an economy that people can be proud of. And so the greatest tragedy I see is the destruction the misalignment of incentives from our leadership. Our leadership is not, if they are aware of those things, they're simply not interested, because, as I said, their incentives is to enrich to themselves, it would appear. And so that is where we stand. But I am while I spoke earlier about the sort of the lack of connection to the youth, to that proud history, including the history of Eole Blanc, and understanding that and getting more grounded and certain in themselves, I also noticed that this even younger generation is starting to get fed up of this, because they are actually plugged into a global community. They have a more liberal mindset in terms of thinking about human freedoms, in terms of thinking about oppression, in terms of thinking about the future, imagining and desiring a more interesting, free, self-creating and self-actualizing future than maybe previous generations of Dominicans have been. And so with that relentless buildup of at least that idea, that concept in young Dominicans that we need a better future. They look around the world and they see places like China making leaps and bounds in terms of going from one of the most impoverished countries to being soon the leading economy in the world. They see that it can happen. They look around and they see the lifestyle of others and they say, we can do so much better, and we can. Dominica could be a paradise, and we can do the genius of the end. We don't have to sacrifice our easygoing community Caribbean lifestyle to be prosperous. We can do both. And that is the interesting adventure possibilities that lie before us. We have a small community, we have a small population. People think it's a disadvantage. I happen to think it's a great advantage. We can do so many things well without massive millions of people to do it for, if we're clever, we're smart. Because at the end of the day, it's about the software of your society. We have the hardware, we have the land, we have the people, we have the resources, we have beautiful vistas, we have ecological resources, we have the resources. That's the hardware. But the software of our institution, our laws, our rules, our incentives, the way we think about ourselves, the integrity, the trust within community, the motivation, the self-determination, those things are the software of our society that determines how we arrange the hardware to create wealth. And that's a very simple formula. And on the issue of democracy, while we may change laws and we may pass new laws and we might seek electoral reform and we seek institutional changes, and they are important, but the most important aspect of preserving and advancing our democracy is to engrave it into the hearts and minds of every Dominican, so that when it is threatened in the future, it is so sacred, it is so valuable, so inscribed into us that we will resist it at all costs. And that is what we must remember when we are aspiring to build this country, that we are building this country in the mind of each individual Dominican: democracy, preservation of democracy, freedom, free will, self-determination. These are the things that we must build as the fundamental structures upon which we build a great nation. And that's our task. That's our task to do, and we start now.
And I suspect that we're up to the task. Because, as you know, if we think global, like you're saying, Bernard, then we will recognize that when we talk the Dominican family, we're talking over 200,000 people. If we don't limit our thinking to Dominicans only at home, but we think of Dominicans abroad worldwide and those at home, we have probably over 200,000 people. I mean, this is a very manageable group of people. It's a lot of resources. Let us not forget, you mentioned China, but let us not forget Singapore. I mean, how they build that country. Basically, it is a people-centered development focus. And look at where they are today, right? So I'm saying this, it is not without hope, because when I hear you speak about the young people, I think the young people need to become more engaged, but in order for them to do that, they have to become more motivated to get engaged. And then you will see a real change. Because once young people get motivated and get engaged, they make change. This is what young people do. So they need to be engaged and motivated to become engaged. But I think there is good hope, because when we have these conversations, when we meet like this, what I see, a common thread I see coming through the conversation is this spirit of unity. We're all talking now about the same thing. We have to unite to build our country, to save our country, and to build our country. I think this is a good thing. If Dominicans get united around their democracy, around the constitution, among development of their people, I think we're heading in the right direction. So I want to go over to Thomson Fontaine. Thomson, I'm happy you're back with us. I'm not sure if Lennox is still with us, but Thomson, certainly, when you hear my voice, you can know that I'm coming to you to ask you to give us your few remarks, and then your winding up. Not sure if Lennox is still with us, but Thomson, certainly, when you hear my voice, you can know that I'm coming to you to ask you to give us your few remarks, and then your winding up.
Okay, thanks. I've been here throughout, listening very attentively. Let me just say that the difference between now and the 70s in terms of the fortunes of our country, Dominica, is leadership. Leadership is indeed everything. You know, in 1968, Edward Oliver Leblanc arranged for a team of Dominican cultural ambassadors to travel to the United Kingdom to perform at the Royal Albert Hall. This is the most, this is at the very pinnacle of British performing arts, and the most hallowed halls and their Dominican culture was on display to a British audience. In 2022, we have foreign artists, Spinach or something to that effect, being promoted over Dominican artists. We see our people being made as second citizens in their own country, foreigners given privilege to work in Dominica, whilst our young people languish on the roadside, on the block. It is disheartening, extremely disheartening what we see in Dominica today. And for those of us children of the 70s and 80s and 90s who've seen a better Dominica and know that better can be done, it has to do with the leadership of this country. And the question then becomes, what are we going to do about it? Are we satisfied to continue to allow Dominica to languish the way it is languishing? You know, I was reading quickly as we were talking. I was looking quickly at some past papers from the, from this paper. I can't remember the name now. In the 1960s, sorry, and they were estimating Dominica's population to be 80,000 by 1970, and our population have reversed and gone down since. And a lot of it has to do with people being discouraged. I'm told even now there is a scramble to get out of Dominica, a scramble for people to leave the country because there is no hope, there is no prospects of development. And it's truly sad, but I believe we can do better. I believe now is a chance, as Edward Oliver said, for us to speak with one voice, work together as one people, not be divided. You know, I remember Prime Minister telling the people of Dominica that if you see Lennox Linton, call him a traitor. See Thomson, call him a traitor. Encouraging divisiveness, encouraging disharmony among a very small population. We can do better. We definitely can do better. I believe as Dominicans, we can come together. We can work collectively. We can work across the broad spectrum of green, red, blue, independent, yellow, whatever it is. We can work together. We are not tribes. We are united as a Dominican populace, one people, and we can work together. I want to just end with this. I want to end again with a quote from the book by Dr. Andre, Edward Oliver Leblanc, and the Struggle to Transform Dominica. And this is taken from the closing address, the national address that Edward Oliver Leblanc gave when he was leaving office on July 14, 1974. He had this to say: "At this stage, I wish to point out that today I have nothing more use value than I possessed when I became chief minister in 1961. By rough calculation, I have paid $40,000 in taxes over the years. paid $6,000 to the party in accordance with our rules and regulations, give 6 children other than my own an education, and assisted my fellow man in diverse ways. My cash holdings are Barclays Bank, $56.33, Royal Bank, $25.07, nullified by an overdraft at Barclays Bank of $465. I have no life insurance for myself or family. Those I had were withdrawn at surrender value to settle my debts incurred on behalf of myself and erstwhile friends. Now, when you compare this statement with Prime Minister gloating to tell the people of Dominica, I don't care about you, I have my insurance, when I get sick, I can fly my family out, but you got to stay and die at the PMH or the Frederick Hospital. When you compare and you contrast, you see how leadership becomes critical. And so I'll end on this note, not in despair, because I believe that as long as there is life, there is hope. As long as we can dream and we can have that vision that things will get better. I believe the people of Dominica are at the point now when they realize that they need to change that leadership in Dominica. I believe people are at the point where they realize that the only hope really for us as a people is to get rid of this administration. It's all about legacy. It's all about what we can do for ourselves. And I would encourage the people of Dominica to think very seriously about the kind of Dominica that they want for the future. And let us work together. Together, I will continue to stress together, to build this Dominica that we want. Thank you, Mr. G, for the time, and to Lennox, I may have missed you at the beginning, Honorable Lennox Linton, strong, firm, and dedicated leader. And to Bernardito, actually, I taught Bernard at St. Mary's Academy. Bernard, remember those good days at the Academy. So it's good to see you, and congratulations to all of you, and continued guidance.
Yeah, but Thomson, as I go to opposition leader, Leader Lennox Linton, for his closing remarks and for his brief comments and then his closing remarks, I have to put this out there from what you said. You said leadership matters and has consequences. So whenever we take a decision to choose our leaders, think Edward Oliver LeBlanc type of leader, because leadership matters, it has consequences. We can compare and contrast the eras of all our leaders. I think Edward Oliver LeBlanc, his era is a good one to look at. When we come to look at Patrick Roland John next week, our first Prime Minister, we'll find a lot of stuff that is very good also in his era that we can look at. So, Mr. Lennox Linton, I go to you now for your further comments and your winding up remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. G. I think this is the first program I've been involved in either as host or participant where one member of the panel almost fell asleep because he has not been required to speak for 2 hours. So I almost fell asleep there, Mr. G. I'm happy I'm still awake to give my closing comments.
Well, I hope you had pleasure.
Well, sometimes sometimes I dozed off, but I think I was awake for the majority of the conversation, the very enlightened conversation. What are we looking at? If we go back to Edward Oliver LeBlanc, it's a man I knew well because himself and my father were good friends. My parents were friends of himself and his wife, and the children were also friends. So I was privileged in my youthful days to play sometimes on the lawn outside of the Premier's residence at Mount Bruce, and the children visited us in Didier Lane and so on, Einstein, Ellsworth, and your friendly what, and Erin, the daughter. So I knew him well, and I think I am able to say right now that the big difference we're looking at was that Edward Oliver LeBlanc, as Dominica Labour Party leader of Dominica back in the 60s, He believed that Dominicans were good enough. He believed that Dominicans were worthy. That Dominicans were good enough to enjoy the right to elect, to choose their own government of the people, by the people, for the people. He never stood in the way of that. He didn't believe that government was his preserve to control and to take advantage of for his own private wealth creation, because the facts and the record tell the story of how he left politics, what he had at the time that he left, and he made the point of putting it on the public record. This is what I have at this bank, this is what I have at that bank in terms of savings balance, in terms of overdraft. This is the status of my life insurance, etc. He put it on the public record. So if you go back, you're looking at somebody who did not go into elective politics seeking to represent people for the purpose of wealth creation for themselves. And underlying that, side by side with that, you had this belief in the people that he was seeking to lead, that they were good enough. They were good enough to be properly empowered to contribute, whether it was in the private sector or in the public sector, to the national effort to earn a worthwhile place in the international trade of goods and services for the benefit of all Dominicans. And if you segue now to what's happening today, you do not have someone in the leadership of the country who believes in the people's right and will uphold the people's right to elect their own government. As a matter of fact, he has methodically worked on taking that right away from the people in the last 10 to 15 years. Neither do you have a leader in the government, Labour Party government, who believes in the capability of Dominicans. Everywhere you turn, the foreigner is his preference. Whether you're selling passports, it is the foreigners who are better at it. And those locals who do it or are involved have to be subservient to the sellers from the overseas. The build out of the economic infrastructure. Dominicans are not good enough. So we turn to the foreigners. We turn to one man to give him all of the public work involved in major projects like the international airport. No bid, no competitive tender. Just hand it to him on a platter while Dominicans are waiting for opportunity. So everywhere you turn, you're looking at a leader who does not believe that the citizens of the country that he represents are good enough to partner in the development of their own country, to participate in the development of their own country. He believes that all they're good for is to be used for his own wealth creation purposes. And if you look at the record of advancement around the world, no country has made progress under that kind of leadership. The missing piece in the leadership, because it will change from person to person who appears, who makes it to the national front, who makes it to the national leadership position. But we as individuals, we the people also have our individual leadership responsibilities, you know. We have to find a way of leading ourselves to positions in our lives where we make sensible decisions and choices about what is good for us. Because where the leadership at the top fails us, we must be able as individuals to lead ourselves into decisions about changing that top leadership that is injuring our best interests, that is riding our backs for their own personal benefit, that are reducing our independence and making us more dependent, that are behaving as though our lives don't matter, that other people's lives matter more than us. No country is successfully built with leadership of that nature. But when we get to the stage where we have that kind of leadership, we must be able to lead ourselves into changing that leadership for the good and for the betterment of Dominica. So we had LeBlanc. We had other leaders after LeBlanc. And we have come now to another Labour Party leader, who, though he is connected to the LeBlanc family, couldn't be more different from LeBlanc as a leader of men who sought to ensure that wrong would not rule his country, that justice would not be asleep in his country, and that freedom would never weep in Dominica. Today we see all that happening. And we say leadership is everything. Yes, leadership is everything. And under the leadership we have had for the last 20 years, we have lost our moral compass in Dominica. We have lost our development direction. Just think about all of the people who've been given houses and homes under this administration, and those who received houses under previous administrations. 2 years after they received the keys to go into the homes, they still don't have title. They still don't have ownership, because the intention was never for them to enjoy the benefits of ownership. The intention was for them to be beholden to those who gave them the keys to go into the apartment, but for them to have this sword forever hanging over their heads that should you say anything that is politically incorrect, as far as we're concerned, we can pull our keys because you don't have title. And tonight again, as I remember the spirit of Edward Oliver LeBlanc, under whose watch something like that would never happen. The people would have had title for their homes a long time ago. I call again for the people of Dominica who have received houses, apartments, funded by the Citizenship by Investment Program resources, to be given title for those lands. There's an excuse being bandied about the place that amendments have to be made to the Strata Title Act. How long does that take? Under the existing Strata Title Act, all of the people who now have apartments can receive title for those apartments. And all of the people living in the apartments under the legislation can be formed into a corporation that will be responsible for managing this space. So they choose their leaders. Democratization. They choose their leaders year on year that will decide how we're going to go about this aspect of the maintenance, how we're going to raise funds for this, for that. They take care of their business so that there is a management structure in place under the law, the existing Strata Title Act, to manage the properties where different people are living on different floors, in different areas. Let's get rid of the excuses. If we need to go to Parliament, let's do that tomorrow. Let's go next week. We are a country having 3 meetings of Parliament a year. What is that in 2022? Come on. So there's a lot to be done. I heard a lot of voices tonight saying that they're not daunted, that there's hope. I join those voices. And I thank you, Mr. G. Thanks, Bernard. Thanks, Kent. Thank you, Thomson, all the way down there in Juba, in South Sudan. And thank you, my brother, Dr. Irving Andre. Thank you, Lambi, in the studio. And thank you all of those who were kind enough to stay up with us.
And Lennox, let us thank you especially because you
words
see,
are lovely.
Yeah, you
Dark
see,
indeed.
the
But we have
thing,
promises to keep, and miles to go before we sleep, and miles to go before we sleep. That was, I think, was Robert Frost. Thank you.
well, yes, if you were wrong, there's nobody here to correct you. You know better than us. But here's the thing, Lennox. When you speak about those voices and you say you join those voices, you are the voice that has been really in the center of it all for quite a while now. Taking all of the licks for it, but your back looks like it's very broad. And
no, it's not broad. It's just that it has a certain kind of texture.
Oh, it's like a leaf, like a dashing leaf.
Not the broadness, it's the dashing leaf texture that makes a difference.
All right, but it's all good. And I want to say
because if you notice, Irving's back is not broad enough, but he's not broad like that. It's the texture. We have the same kind of texture of back.
I, I let him speak for himself because he speaks well. Now, here is the thing that, you know, when you speak about the Strata Titles Act, Lennox, just before I go to Irving to do his closing remarks, and I know he has a few things to say before he closes. I mean, this is not the first administration that has built apartments.
Exactly.
And this apartment units and the people who own those apartments now, they got titles to them under the Strata Titles Act. The same Strata Titles Act that exists now. I can think of several people who own, but they got their titles in apartment units under the Strata Titles Act. So, I mean, there's absolutely no reason why those persons who are occupying those units cannot receive their titles under this act. You may have to make some modernize. It's always fine, modernize your laws. But I think what's the most important thing is to give the people who occupy them peace of mind, that they know they own the thing that they live in. So they know they can leave something for their children when their time has come. But I just want to say, Irving, as I go to you, that everything we've said about Edward Oliver Leblanc tonight is quite correct. I hope that what his son is listening, and I hope we did just. I hope he can call me tomorrow. Tell me whether he did justice, because I know he spent a lot of time with his dad before he passed, and I know he took copious notes of their conversations. So he has many things that he might be able to share with you, Irving. But I knew this man personally, and there's no better way to get to know a man well than to play dominoes with him. Either he Kool-Aid boot or he trying to power his any game. You get to know a man when you play dominoes with him. I played dominoes.
But we're interested, Sheridan. What was your record against the former premier?
Oh, I mean, he beat me a few times. No, I mean, he beat me a few times, but I have to. Norris Prevost might be able to verify some of what I say. He used to be there sometime with us playing, Kool-Aid boot. But the point, yes, but the point is, you see, there is this camaraderie, and you get to know somebody, their heart, when you're playing those kind of games. And at his home, that's where we did that. And I have to also shout out to his brother who passed, Lips Leblanc, who was my very special godfather, and to his wonderful wife, his dear wife, Stella. Wonderful person. I mean, I've known her for a very long time. I mean, she's so warm, very, very nice person. And I really cherish her for that. And I tell her that every time I see her when I'm home. But Irving, I think we did the whole 9 yards with Edward Oliver Leblanc. Anything that we forgot, I'm sure we'll be reminded by Hewitt and some other people. And next week, we're going to speak about our first Prime Minister, Patrick Rowland John. And I hope some other people will join us who knew him, who can comment on it and work with us and contribute to whatever we add to this. And certainly, when we come to speak up to those prime ministers that are alive today, I hope that we will, in fact, be able to get them to themselves come in and make a comment about themselves to see what we may have missed about them. People like Edward Oliver J. Serafin and Edison James, they're alive. So, and because they're alive, they may be able to, put in a word for themselves and tell us something about themselves. So we look forward to them making themselves available for that. Irving, I just wanted to give you the last word and to tell us your final comments and your winding up, Max. Your mic.
Let me thank you for hosting this program. Our esteemed panelists who've acquitted themselves very well, in my view. Your listeners who've stayed on, and Lennox has just clarified one mystery, because he was saying that he wondered whether he was going to fall asleep, and I was wondering, why is he wearing his taffeta pajamas on your show tonight? But at least he's clarified that, and at least I'm the wiser. The contributions of all have been, in my view, fantastic. I think they've been very edifying. And I think when I walk out of here this evening, I will be the much stronger and the much more enlightened than I was. But let me start off by probably making reference to this song that I think it's Pastor Rodney and his band of wonderful pastors, how they end their program by that song, a Trinidadian Calypsonian, with reference to the fact that our leaders are obsessed with building skyscrapers. In Dominica, it's building hotels, although we're not sure who are going to come to those hotels. They're busy building all these things, but they're destroying everything of value. They're not. Are they building character, for God's sakes? Are they building communities? Are they building charity? Are they building consensus? Are they building camaraderie in Dominica? Are they building concern for the environment? Are they building our culture? Are they fostering or building a climate of tolerance? These are the types of values that will inure to the benefit of Dominicans today. Because to the extent that we can cultivate these values, then we wouldn't have to worry about whether or not we should give this one or that one a stimulus package. We wouldn't have to worry about whether, like a thief in the night, we should be out distributing yellow or brown paper bags. We shouldn't have to worry about somebody, a whistleblower, finding out about some obscene contract to build yet another hotel. And everybody who knows, especially if you listen to Isaac, to John Baptist today on radio, you will know that the contract is padded with dollars, kickbacks, to be quite frank with you. At whose expense? At the taxpayer's expense. So if we build those values, we wouldn't have to worry about these things. Dominica will be a much better place. We will not be squandering all the talents of a Thomson Fontaine, of an Ito Bernard Ito, of many other folks, Ken Vidal, economists who are revered in the region, but who are regarded as pariahs in their own community. We wouldn't have to worry about those things. We wouldn't have to be demonizing people who have the audacity to stand up and say this is wrong. We wouldn't have to worry about ostracizing and persecuting and banishing the likes of Thomson Fontaine, or criminalizing or weaponizing the law against everyone who dares to oppose. We wouldn't have to worry about these things because we would have built a solid foundation of nationhood. But what instead are we doing? We're tearing down every aspect of it, whether it's the environment, whether it's our architectural thing, whether it's the integrity of our institutions, whether it's the integrity of the electoral process, whether it's the integrity of the banking system, whether it's the cohesiveness of the community. We are busy dismantling it as if there was no tomorrow. But there's hope. There's hope. As long as we're alive, as long as we breathe the rarefied air that provides and nourishes our bodies, there is hope. And yes, amidst the suffering, amidst the despondency, amidst the despair, amidst the depression, we can look forward to the fact that given that there is a Ken Vital, given that there's a Bernardito, a Lennox Linton, a Lambie, a Sheridan Gregoire, a Blue for God's sakes. She probably made the most insightful comment on your radio program today when she reminded the experts, those who would proclaim that it is citizenship rather than residence that is the main criterion for voting. You have an electoral act which says you have to live in a constituency for a certain period of time before you're eligible to vote. She went to the law school, Hurtault Law School, just as I did. She understood that instinctively. We have to empower our people to take charge of themselves, to provide for themselves, to provide for their families, to ensure their children go to school, and to make something of themselves. And in my respectful view, based on this program, based on what I know exists out there, even in the midst of despair, even in the midst of this wonderful storm, wonderful in the sense that probably it makes us deep, deep within, even in the midst of this COVID, for God's sakes, there is hope. There is hope that we can do better. And there's hope that we should not relegate or delegate our efforts to any one entity, to any so-called political leader or any other type of leader who, quite frankly, does not have the interests of the community at heart. So I take hope that Dominica will rise again. And I hope I can be part of that ascension as it were. Thank you.
Well, certainly you are. Lennox is, from the time you mentioned about the pajamas, Lennox he can't stop smiling. I'm not sure what it is about pajamas that he.
I describe the fabric because I know you are a fabric expert. Tough it.
Okay. But he said, Lennox, your mic is muted though, if you want to say something. But
no, that's the doc. When the doc speaks, we listen. Huh?
Well, yes.
When he's talking taffeta or can or.
It almost sounds like he remembered us, by Trinity days.
I do actually.
Being one of the premier fashion people back in the day in the 70s with jeans and so on from by Trinity.
That's right.
I mean, you guys were the designers. We were the retailers on the floor.
Exactly.
Lennox was the expert,
I know he was the expert.
Lennox and Ken and Brian and it was who was with us again?
Grenville Prevost and Frankie
and Thomson.
Yeah, and even Sogo Fly, man.
These are the fashion plates of the day.
Yeah. By the way, back in those times, By Trinity did something that probably was ahead of its time. They actually brought in a very popular disc jockey from Antigua called Toby Gans.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And there were Saturday mornings when Toby Gans would be at the By Trinity location in downtown. The speakers outside blasting. That was an event, right?
Yes.
Because people knew of Toby Gans from ZDK Radio in Antigua. And whenever we'd be in town on a Saturday morning By Trinity, that was a national event.
Everybody out.
That's fantastic.
Fantastic. When we talk about those things, By Trinity, a little guy, from Salisbury. He didn't finish high school. But look at the kind of man, look what he turned out to be. Look at what he inspired everybody to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that little store there, this man started with a suitcase with fabric.
Mm-hmm.
It became the store, then went to the factory and some. But really and truly, it just tells you what little ordinary people can do. They can do extraordinary things if you place some confidence in them and give them the support that they require. You see what Edward Oliver was doing? He was on the right track.
Yep.
If we would when we get back the 4.2, if we would take some of that and give to a lot of these small people who have the aspirin manufacturing, agribusiness, instead of asking them to go to the bank for loans, they're not looking for millions, they might need a few 100,000. Let's give it to them. Let them realize their dreams and create all the jobs and create the exports and create the valuable products, adding value to our natural resources. I think our young people are talented, they're ready to do that. We saw it with By Trinity. We've seen it with many others since that time. I think they're ready to do that if they give them a chance. All right?
Yep. We have to give the chances and the opportunities to the stones that the builder refused.
Right. Precisely. Gentlemen,
if we can give the developers of hotels $60, $70, $100 million to build $40 and $50 million hotels, certainly we can give the young entrepreneurs in manufacturing, in agriculture, in tourism, in the financial services sector, the capital they need free of cost to build out the enterprises. That's not too much to ask.
It's not
when you see this kind of recklessness and waste, you realize that who is in government right now, it's not really about the development of people. They're all about themselves. And that's what we have to change.
But let's look at this as an example, because you mentioned By Trinity. Let us not forget what By Trinity was. Just a little store, but we did a factory to make the garments, because we figured after a while, look, instead of just selling it, let's make it. But we had 125 people employed.
Back in the 70s.
In the 70s. And we exported that product to every single island in the Caribbean, from Jamaica to Guyana, on the shelves of most of the prestigious stores in those countries like Cape Shepherd and Habib's and so on, and also in the French territories of Guadeloupe and Martinique, because we made a jeans that fit their market, their cut, the French cut jeans. And so it means that any one of these young people you see around the place selling their little thing by the road, and These people, if you give them a chance, they can do great things. That is why I wanted us to live tonight with hope that all of what we've said tonight is because we have the aspiration to lift people up, just like Edward Oliver wanted to lift people up, because I believe these ordinary people can do extraordinary things if you just give them a shot at it. So, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Look at
Thank you
one
very
last
much.
thing. One last thing, Sheridan. You met Irving Andre in his the first part of his presentation mentioned a number of businesses that were incentivized and came into existence in the LeBlanc era. One of those was Dominica Coconut Products.
That's right.
Exactly.
Now, remember what I said about the belief that Edward LeBlanc had that Dominicans could be world class. And look at what happened with DCP. We had gotten to a stage in Dominica where this facility was shipping out 1,000 containers of product, exporting 1,000 containers of product every year to 18 export territories, was selling in excess of 95% of what it produced in Dominica was being exported. That's what we are capable of in Dominica. And that's what we're at risk of forgetting now as the value of Dominicans is attacked by the current leadership in favor of what comes from the outside. And we have to turn that back. Thanks.
Well, yes. Very, 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 very well said indeed. And remember, as Ken said earlier, as we go, when LeBlanc came in, there this import substitution theory that came in from the region. Well, that laid the foundation for export-led growth. So much so that because we're small, I believe it is very easy for 95% of our production to be exported. Very, very easy if we go large enough. And I think we have the capacity to do that with the natural resources that we have, with the water and so on and so on and so on. So, gentlemen, I think we had a terrific discussion tonight. I loved it, every bit of it. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Next week, Tuesday, we're talking about our first Prime Minister, Patrick Roland John. I hope everybody who's listening to us on Facebook, with us on WhatsApp, on the radio, please join us next week, Tuesday, for another very exciting discussion on the life, the leadership, and the legacy of Patrick Roland John. So good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you very much, folks. Have a great evening. See you guys.
Good night, gentlemen.
All right.
All listeners.
Next time.
Thank you very much, guys.
Right.
Good night, everybody.
Right. Okay.